Alana turned off the bedroom light. Time to go to bed, she thought. Tomorrow would be a day off, so she could stay in bed longer. But it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning and her eyes were getting sleepy. I can't wait to get under the covers. In her head flashed only one thought. The woman watched her favorite TV series, and here she could not tear herself away. There was everything: love, betrayal, and a difficult period in the main character. All this was so reminiscent of the fate of Alana. The series, as it should, ended with a happy ending. It was clear from the very beginning. In such movies, it could not be otherwise. And in Alana's life, anything could happen. However, the circumstances were such that now she is doing well. I can't believe it sometimes. How great it all turned out in the end. She smiled at the thought that Alana's life was as if it had been scripted by the director of all those TV shows. It all started many years ago, and at the start of her life, young Alana was faced with a lot of adversity and loss. Her childhood came in memories only vaguely. Only sensations and images remained in her memory. Her father, strong and reliable, often carried her daughter on his strong shoulders. The girl adored these moments. And fun, and a little scary to look at the world from such a height, thought Alana, feeling the support of her father's hands. Her mom was like a warm hug, kisses, with a gentle voice, her face so high it was lost in a haze. Alana couldn't remember mom's features. They were blurring and slipping away. But amazingly, for some reason, Alana could still clearly see her mother's dress in front of her, turquoise with small black polka dots. And then her parents were gone. Everything happened suddenly. A fire in the dormitory, caused by a cigarette butt left on the sofa, took the lives of young students. Luckily, Alana stayed at a 24-hour daycare center that night. She remembered longing for her family. First she cried, then she was angry at her mom and dad. Why don't they come? Why don't they pick me up like they used to? The nanny, as best she could, tried to explain to the 3-year-old girl what had happened. What had happened? Alana was very small then, but she still remembered her feelings: fear, despair, and for some reason, rage. The girl was about to be sent to an orphanage, and the paperwork was already being processed when her Aunt Alex, her father's sister, suddenly showed up. Alex lived in the village, single-handedly raising 2 daughters, and she didn't really need Alana. Brother and sister did not communicate much, but relatives of Alan's father persuaded Alex, saying that it would be wrong if the girl would grow up in an orphanage when her aunt was alive. As a result, Alex's aunt, for whom the opinion of people was very important, sheltered her niece. Alanino's childhood was not a happy one. Aunt Alex was not happy about the extra mouth, but she fulfilled her duties, dressed, fed, and brought up Alana. She sent her niece to school on time, kept her busy, and taught her household skills. But the aunt's attitude toward her own daughters was different. She looked at them with love and tenderness, bought sweets for them with her last money, and dressed them up in clean dresses. Alanina's wishes were not taken into account. She received old clothes, after her cousins. When they fidgeted in front of the mirror, her aunt smiled, calling them beauties and photo models. Alana, trying to get approval, did the same, but heard in her address a completely different assessment. That's the same monkey screams. All in the mother went, would not have been a case to do. So, trying to be inconspicuous and not to attract attention to herself, Alana became more and more withdrawn. To prove to Alex that she had not taken her niece in vain, and that she could be of use to her, became an urgent task for Alana. From an early age, she realized that no one would love her just for her pretty eyes. Recognition and respect had to be earned. Dreaming of independence, after finishing 9 grades of village school, Alana decided that it was time to act. She applied to the college, as continuing her school education and entering a university seemed something impossible. You need to get a profession as soon as possible and become independent, Aunt Alex reasoned, frankly expressing the idea that university was not an option for Alana. Once you get a specialty, you'll start earning your own money, Auntie persuaded, not hiding her thoughts that it was time for Alana to think about a future outside the village. The phrase "you're a hula face" had been said to her, but despite that, Alana felt she had grown up to be a pretty girl. She saw her reflection and noticed traits in herself that set her apart from her cousins. Alana realized more and more how much she resembled her mother, who had also grown up in an orphanage. Alana knew little about her maternal relatives, but she thought that perhaps they would have accepted her differently, better than Aunt Alex. Modest and quiet, Alana did not spend her evenings with boys or go dancing, but she still found admirers in the village. By the age of 16, she was being courted by local boys, which was a surprise to the girl and perhaps proof that she had something special that attracted attention to her. Alana decided that before building a personal life, she wanted to achieve professional independence and feel more confident in her own abilities. She did not seek an early marriage, for she had dreams of a strong family and a loving husband, and she realized that to realize these dreams, she had to become independent first. After high school, Alana went to the city and soon began to live an independent life. She was full of ambition and desire to achieve independence. City life seemed confusing to her at first, but over time Alana adapted to it, rejoicing in her relative independence from her aunt. At the age of 20, Alana proudly received a degree in food technologist, but soon faced the realities of adult life when she realized that without work experience it would be difficult to find a job in her specialty. After graduation, the state support stopped, and the girl had to look for any job to support herself. Alana started looking for work actively, not neglecting even low-skilled jobs, such as a cleaner in the Housing and Utilities Department, because she had to survive somehow. The job was hard and poorly paid, but the offer of a room under the stairs was a lifeline, even though it only provided her with shelter and a minimal means of subsistence. Nevertheless, Alana didn't give up, continuing to look for a better job where she could use her knowledge and get paid accordingly. She went to many interviews, carefully presenting her red diploma to potential employers, but to no avail until one day she was lucky. Alana came to one interview at a beverage company with the hope that she would finally be able to start a career in her profession and prove to herself and everyone around her that she could break the stereotype of a young professional with no experience and succeed. She saw a vacancy in the newspaper and decided to try her luck. Already in the first minutes of the interview, the girl realized that she would not be taken. The employee of the personnel department, it seemed, communicated with Alana for a tick. Maybe she was fulfilling some recruitment plan or creating the appearance of work. I immediately guessed that she wouldn't be hired here as a technologist. And then he entered the office, Kevin, a tall man in jeans and a plain black t-shirt under which I could see strong muscles. You could tell he played some kind of sport or went to a gym. He had a sense of strength and self-confidence. He looked like a Hollywood actor, slightly mocking eyes, white teeth, a smile, charming dimples on his cheeks. The man was about 15 years older than Yana. The girl, without wanting to, looked at him. Then she realized and looked away. It was not enough that he noticed her involuntary admiration. He'd think she was a fool. But Kevin noticed. He winked cheerfully at Alana and turned to the human resources lady. "Who's this young, lovely creature who's applying for the technologist position? But she's not a good fit. She has no experience at all, and her specialty is not the same. It's hard to find a job for young people without experience." The man shook his head, looking at Alana with interest. "It's hard for them. What about the secretary position? I need a new assistant right now. She's young, quick, energetic, and she's got the right looks, which is important for our image. We wanted to transfer a technician to this place from the energy department," reminded the personnel officer. "Let's put the girl on probation." "Something tells me she can handle it," Kevin said, winking at Alana. He grabbed a file from his desk and left the office. Without expecting it, Alana had become a secretary. The job was not difficult, and the girl was quickly brought up to speed. She was required to answer the phone and record messages for the boss when he was absent from work. Also, Alana had to prepare coffee for Kevin's visitors and treat them while they were waiting for their turn in the reception area. The salary offered to the girl was such that she couldn't even believe her luck. With this money, she could rent a nice apartment, eat well, and buy herself nice outfits. She could even save a little every month. But all of this kept Alana's mind at ease. Her new responsibilities, her co-workers, and the chic surroundings of the reception area where she worked now were very different from the dirty driveway cleaning she'd been doing recently. But Alana enjoyed her interactions with Kevin. He turned out to be very kind, understanding, and fun. Her boss treated her well, praised her performance, complimented her, and discussed work issues. Alana didn't notice how she fell in love. It was probably her first and immediately strong love. She couldn't imagine life without this man. The object of her secret love was Kevin, of course. But Alana knew he was married to the beautiful and intelligent Cynthia and had 3 wonderful sons. Trying to condemn herself for these feelings, she couldn't escape her sincere emotions. But she realized that this situation had no future. She shouldn't be a nuisance in someone else's family. After convincing herself over the weekend, Alana decided to end her reverie. Over the weekend, Alana got used to the idea that there was nothing she and the chief could have in common. But on Monday, once again seeing his smile and eyes with a sly squint, the girl again ceased to control herself. She was dreaming, daydreaming for real. She wanted Kevin to hug her, to kiss her, to hold her close. Alana would be the happiest person in the world. One evening, Kevin invited Alana into his office. It was late. The co-workers had dispersed. The boss was preparing for an upcoming audit and stayed late to look over the reports. Alana was required by regulation to stay in her office as long as the boss was at work. Kevin rarely stayed late, once every couple or 3 months at most. That's when he did too. "Alana, I need to talk to you straight," the man began as Alana sat down in the visitor's chair. The girl tensed up. Maybe the chief had some complaints about her work. Suddenly he would offer her to write a letter of resignation. Where else would she find such a job? "We've had you for 6 months. You're a good girl, you're a good worker. But I realized not too long ago that it's not just those qualities that attract me to you," Kevin continued, looking Alana straight in the eye and speaking in a quiet, calm voice. Thinking about what had happened, Alana was already feeling a little dizzy. Her heart was pounding frantically in her chest and a chill appeared in her stomach, just like before exams. "I think you have some feelings for me too." "I'm right," Kevin said, looking at Alana point blank and waiting for an answer. How could the girl deny the obvious? Yes, of course she did. She'd been in love with the chief for a long time, tried not to show her feelings, thought she was succeeding well. But no, Kevin, it turns out, understood everything. Later, many years later, Alana looked at the situation with different eyes. Kevin had pressured her, creating the illusion of a choice, even though the decision had been determined in advance. Kevin is a rich, powerful man, handsome, mature, successful. She is a young girl, completely dependent on him. Kevin clearly understood how important the job and the paycheck were to Alana. He skillfully manipulated young girls, making them lose their heads to him. However, the realization of all this came much later. In those days, it seemed that fate generously rewarded her. The girl couldn't even believe her luck. Kevin paying attention to her was unbelievable. She loved him and was willing to do anything for him. "Yes, you're right. I have feelings for you too," Alana admitted, blushing. She herself didn't understand why she suddenly felt so vulnerable. "Then I'm not wrong," the man smiled. "Let's make a deal first. Let's stop replacing each other. Second, I really want to spend more time with you. So I suggest right now we have dinner at a restaurant somewhere. How about it?" Alana shrugged. She wasn't yet used to the idea of Kevin himself proposing a relationship to her. It seemed unbelievable. At that moment, the girl had completely forgotten about her boss's wife and his 3 sons. It all seemed unimportant. The main thing was Kevin, who looked at her with tenderness and admiration, smiled and invited her to dinner. "I'm probably not dressed for a restaurant," Alana finally said. There was no dress code in the company. Everyone wore what they wanted to wear. On this day, Alana came to work in jeans and a t-shirt. If she had known in advance, she would have worn one of her favorite dresses, which she now had plenty of thanks to her good salary. Alana, Victor smiled. "You don't understand anything, and you don't even realize how gorgeous you look in those jeans of yours." "It's just adorable," Kevin said with a smile. They did go to a restaurant that evening. It was the first time Alana had been in the cabin of the chief's expensive foreign car, and it was the first time she had been to a restaurant too. The girl felt a little confused at first. She didn't know how to behave and what to say. She was afraid of looking rude and ignorant in front of Victor. But gradually the man did the seemingly impossible with his jokes and compliments. He dispelled her stiffness. She did not notice how she began to communicate with him simply and sincerely. Kevin wanted to know everything about her, and she told him everything about her cold childhood, about her difficult years of study and her work as a janitor. Kevin looked at her seriously and silently, without interrupting, catching every word she said. "Yeah, you've had a hard life," he said when Alana was done. "Life hasn't spoiled you, but you're with me now, and things will be different." Alana smiled. She believed this strong, powerful man unconditionally. Finally, she felt secure and unfamiliar but so pleasant feeling. Later, they kissed for a long time in Kevin's car. Alana was dizzy from his embrace and kisses, loving his warmth and touch and responding eagerly. But suddenly Kevin said it was time to leave. He drove her home and kissed her gently on the cheek goodbye. "You don't look good here," he looked around, surveying his surroundings. "We'll figure something out." From then on, their story began. At work, they didn't advertise their relationship, although Kevin could occasionally smile, especially at Alana in front of all the co-workers, and even compliment her. Soon it was known to everyone. It was making Alana a little tense, but no one said anything to her face. People valued their places and held on to them. Probably that's why no one wanted to ruin the relationship with the chief. Before Alana knew it, Kevin had become everything to her. She didn't need anyone else, just to be near him. To hear his voice, to inhale the scent of her favorite person, to feel the beating of his heart. Alana was ready to dissolve in him, to do for him everything he wanted. When they didn't see each other for a long time, it happened occasionally. Kevin would go on a long business trip or go on vacation with his family. Alana couldn't eat anything. She melted before her eyes and stopped caring about anything. Books were not read, TV series were not watched. The girl counted the days and even hours until she met her beloved. It was like an addiction. Kevin patronized Alana. He liked to surprise and please her. The man was not stingy with gifts, expensive jewelry, brand-name clothes, shoes, certificates to spas. Every time he came up with something new. Kevin rented a luxurious apartment for Alana in the city center, spacious, bright, stylishly furnished. Sometimes he stayed overnight, and in those moments Alana felt especially happy. She imagined they were husband and wife. She didn't have to share him with anyone. And she didn't have to hide either. One thing marred the happiness: Kevin had a family, and that fact was impossible to ignore. The man, without noticing it himself, often told Alana something about his children or his spouse. They were mostly funny and sweet stories. The man loved his boys and had great respect for his wife. Did he love her? Alana couldn't answer that question for herself, and Kevin didn't dare ask. No, they often talked about frank topics, but here Alana was afraid to hear a positive answer. What if Kevin really loved his wife? And she, Alana? Just a passing fancy. And yet Alana felt that Kevin took her very seriously. He may have planned a brief affair with the young secretary at the beginning of the relationship, but then it turned out that they were very good together. Despite the difference in age and social status, "You understand me like no one else," Kevin confessed more than once, looking at Alana. "I feel so good with you, and so relaxed, my soul rests." It's such an amazing feeling to realize that there's someone who accepts you with all your strengths and weaknesses. Kevin was right. Alana did love him with some kind of unconditional love. Even if Kevin had committed some horrible act or crime, it wouldn't have changed Alana's attitude towards him. 10 years flew by unnoticed. Alana and Kevin grew closer during that time. They occasionally flew together on vacations. Kevin would make out a business trip at work and take Alana with him. Those were wonderful days: the sea, the beaches, the incredible beauty of nature. And it was just the two of them, with no other eyes and ears. Alana wondered more than once if Kevin knew that her husband had a mistress for a long time. It was unlikely that she was still in the dark. The woman didn't seem naive or stupid. One day, Alana dared to ask Kevin about it. "Don't worry," he smiled, stroking Alana's hair. "She and I have a loose relationship. We don't stress each other with jealousy and control. Cynthia, just like me, is free to do whatever she wants." Alana couldn't understand it. She explained to herself that this relationship between the couple was not a marriage of love, but of convenience. Kevin and Cynthia's parents were big businessmen who had decided to pool their capital and invest it in their children. There wasn't much love between the couple. Alana liked to think so. It was somehow comforting and gave her hope that when Kevin's children grew up and became independent, he could finally divorce his wife to make her, Alana, his lawfully wedded wife. Alana was no longer the young, inexperienced 20-year-old secretary who had agreed to have an affair with her boss. She was well into her 30s, but she was still naive, perhaps even worldly stupid. It seemed to her, though, that sooner or later Kevin would marry her. 2 more years passed, and then one morning Alana realized she couldn't get out of bed. She felt sick, nausea rising to her throat at the slightest movement. At that moment, the woman guessed that a miracle had happened. It looked like she was expecting a baby. Despite the fact that she and Kevin were very careful, no method of contraception gives 100% results. And here's the result. Despite not feeling well, Alana suddenly felt happy. Her soul felt warm and clear. She still got out of bed and got to the pharmacy where she bought the test. Alana was afraid that she was wrong, but the test did not disappoint. 2 bright stripes showed that she had a baby under her heart. Before talking to Kevin, Alana was hardly worried at all. Yes, he'd said more than once that he didn't want any more children, but she didn't think Kevin wouldn't be happy when he found out about the baby. He loved her so much, cared for her so tenderly, showered her with compliments and gifts. Wouldn't he be happy to hear that they were going to have a baby soon? Alana has been dreaming of a baby for so long, envying moms with strollers. And now she's going to have a baby too. Finally, a son or a daughter, whatever. Kevin, however, frowned when he heard the news. Alana, we had a deal. There was an accusing tone in his voice. I don't know how it happened, Alana said, surprised at herself. She had already realized that Kevin was not happy about the baby, but she was still hoping to change his mind. She wanted him to share her joy and excitement, to tell her that everything would be all right. But it wasn't. Kevin stood his ground. He didn't want a child, and the only way out was to terminate the pregnancy. Children out of wedlock were out of the question. Alana cried, begged Kevin to come to his senses, and for the first time in their 12-year relationship, she was angry with him. How dare he suggest she get rid of her long-awaited, wanted child? I love you, I love what we have. But the baby doesn't. I have a right to decide that too. No, you don't. Alana slammed the door and stormed out of the apartment Kevin had rented for her. She ran out into the night, wherever she could see. The woman wasn't afraid to stay on the street. She had a cell phone and had accumulated a small fortune over the years. She and her child would have enough for the first time, and then Alana would find a job and things would get better. I won't betray you, my little one, Alana said to her daughter. Yes, to her daughter. Alana realized what was waiting for the girl the moment she ran away from home. Alana quit her job at Kevin's company and rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town where rent was cheaper. Kevin called often, but every time she answered, she thought he'd come to his senses. But no, he was still insistent he wanted Alana back, but he was urging her to get rid of the baby. Alana was nervous, under tremendous stress every day. She dreaded the future. She couldn't find a job and now had no one to lean on. Alana had grown accustomed to Kevin, to his sensitivity, attention, tenderness, support. He playfully solved all the problems that arose and with a few words lifted Alana's mood. And now Kevin had become alien and inaccessible. Alana felt their connection breaking, and it was almost physically painful. Sometimes she even thought about doing what Kevin wanted her to do, get rid of the baby and go back to her old life. But those thoughts quickly faded. No, Alana would have this baby, give birth to it, and raise it. She could handle it. She had wanted to be a mother for so long. However, despite Alana's best efforts, she was unable to keep the pregnancy going. Worries, constant stress, and nerves, all this together led to a tragic result. Alana curled up right on the street. The pain was such that her eyes went black. She thought she was going to faint. Someone called an ambulance. Alana was taken away from the store, on whose porch she was curled up in pain. The woman was ready to endure any agony as long as her baby was saved. But something told her that nothing would work. There was still hope, but it was very weak and ghostly. In the hospital, on a cold couch, indifferent eyes of doctors, and a voice that said terrible words for Alana clean. There's nothing left to save. Then Alana lay in a room surrounded by other women who were still pregnant. The doctors had saved their babies, and being among themselves, the expectant mothers discussed their babies. Each of them was sure that all threats were over and their babies would be born. Alana, on the other hand, was no longer hopeful. At the first round, the doctor shocked Alana with the news. He told her that she would probably never become a mother again. Your case is complicated. This was about saving your life. You should know that it is unlikely you will be able to have a natural birth. But the doctors added that there are options, as medicine does not stand still. Alana didn't listen. Further, she fell into the abyss of despair and fear. Was her biggest dream not going to come true? Would no one ever call her mom? What was there to live for? Kevin met Alana at the hospital. How did he know what had happened? Alana was surprised, but not really surprised. She didn't feel much at all at that moment. She was going to go to the apartment she'd rented, but Kevin had taken her home, to the place where she'd lived for years, and was happy. "Stop fooling around," Kevin said. "Get back here. We'd already made a mess of things." Alana didn't care. It took her a long time to come back to life. At first she even ate, but only because Kevin forced her to. She wanted nothing more than a couch and a pillow. Alana blamed herself for not keeping the baby safe. Kevin carried some of the blame too. At first she thought it was his fault. But he had tried so hard. Kevin had turned into a sensitive and considerate man again. He cooked her favorite meals for Alana, watched TV shows with her, cared as much as he could. It was very touching. Kevin seemed genuinely sorry for what had happened. I reevaluated the situation and realized that I was being selfish. "I'm sorry, let's start over. This time I'll be more attentive to your wants and needs. The doctors said you were between life and death. It's scary to think that I might have lost you." Gradually, Alana melted away. She accepted the current state of affairs. After all, the world wasn't about children. Many people nowadays consciously choose childlessness. Besides, she had a loving and sensitive man by her side. And Alana decided to stay happy, no matter what. And it worked. Kevin and Alana began to travel more. For the next 2 years, they traveled almost all over the world. They climbed mountains, bobbed on ocean waves, crossed the desert in jeeps. It was thrilling, exciting, and wonderful. The main thing is that Kevin was always there for us, protecting us, supporting us. His children were grown. They didn't need their father, and Cynthia hardly required his presence. Kevin spent more time with Alana, and she was delighted. But as time went on, things began to change. At first it was subtle, but then it became more and more noticeable. Kevin was suddenly incredibly busy, always working late, traveling for business, and when he was with Alana, he was in his own thoughts. He didn't compliment her anymore. He didn't ask her about the past day or share the events of his life. Alana panicked. She was used to having Kevin around, and it seemed to her that it would always be that way. They had been through so much together, but now something strange and frightening was happening. Kevin was clearly drifting away, and the process was gaining momentum. Alana hesitated to talk about it. She was no longer a naive girl, but her insecurities remained. Outwardly, Alana looked like a successful and contented woman, but it was only an appearance. She was afraid to hear honest answers to her questions, which could redefine her life. That's why she kept quiet. Kevin himself had once dared to have a serious conversation. That evening was forever etched in Alana's memory. Kevin arrived late when she was about to go to bed. Alana was glad because she missed him very much. She missed the companionship, the jokes, and even the funny jabs. Maybe it wasn't all that bad if Kevin was here. Maybe Alana was just getting herself worked up. "Alana, this may be hard to accept right off the bat, but we need to break up." Alana felt like she'd been hit over the head. She fluttered her eyelashes and turned pale, and Kevin hastily pulled up a chair for her, afraid she would faint. Then the man talked at length about how happy he'd been with Alana for nearly a decade and a half, describing her virtues and assuring her that she had more to come. He explained that the relationship had simply exhausted itself. There was no longer that spark, passion, emotion. "The same thing is happening to you." "I can see it," Kevin said, but Alana thought he was wrong. It was incomprehensible to her. Kevin probably thought it was easier to believe that Alana's feelings had cooled too. Kevin talked a lot and persuasively, as he always did. Alana listened, sometimes nodding, answering something. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't argue. It was useless. Kevin had decided everything for the two of them. You could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice, read it in every gesture. "I met someone else, and I had strong feelings for her. I didn't expect that to happen in my old age," Kevin admitted. Alana didn't cry, but she was dying inside. She realized that the old Alana was gone. Kevin was everything to her. She had no idea how to live without him. But he had made his choice, and nothing could stop it. The man couldn't hide a smile while talking about his new love. "This is something incredible. Alana, you're going to have to leave my company. You're just going to quit. She'll be working here now. And you and I can't see each other all the time. It's going to be hard on both of you, and on me, of course. Alana nodded, barely holding back tears. I feel so bad about all this, Alana thought. It's going to be okay, Alana smiled, trying not to show how hard it was for her. She didn't want Kevin to feel sorry for her. Just not this. I'm sorry for what happened, but I've been honest with you. This is all very hard. I'll help you find another job. And you can stay in the apartment as long as you want until you find a new one, Kevin added. Thank you, Alana nodded. That was it. Alana's past life was over. She wouldn't stay in the apartment that held so many happy moments. The woman left for another city where nothing would remind her of Kevin. And it wasn't easy. They lived together for almost 15 years. And Alana got used to Kevin, to the joint life with him, thought it would last forever. But everything changed in an instant. Alana found an apartment in a new city thanks to her savings and started looking for a job. She faced a hard truth: it was not so easy to find a job in her specialty. Almost 15 years of working as a secretary did not give her a chance, because there were few suitable vacancies, and she could not do anything else really well. So Alana became a kitchen assistant at a local restaurant. Her job duties ranged from making sure the floors were clean to washing dishes and carrying pots. She did whatever was asked of her. Alana was always ready to work. The work was hard, and at the end of the day her back ached and her legs rang. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to rent a small apartment. And of course there was a nice bonus of taking home leftovers at the end of the day. For Yana, with her limited budget, this was really valuable. Did she miss her former life, a comfortable apartment, traveling, shopping in expensive stores? Probably not. Of course she was sad, but not for the lost prosperity that Kevin had provided. She missed Kevin himself, despite the way things had ended. Alana still loved him so much that even the thought of other men seemed impossible to her. Her friends advised her to get on with her personal life, but her heart wouldn't listen. Sometimes Alana imagined that something would happen to Kevin, that he would lose everything: money, business, house. Naturally, his new girlfriend would immediately leave him. Alana believed she was only with him for the money. As for Kevin's wife, Cynthia, she apparently didn't care about his adventures. Alana, unlike her, would forgive Victor anything and gladly take him back. But those were just fantasies, she was well aware of that. Time passed, and Alana's mental wounds healed, turning into scars. She lived alone, almost reaching her 40s, without children, without a husband, without a profession to be proud of. The absence of a loved one to care for, and who would care for her, was hard on Alana. The loneliness frightened her. Could she fall in love with someone else? There were no suitable candidates in her surroundings. After everything with Kevin, Alana realized that true love existed, and she could no longer settle for anything less. Alana couldn't bring herself to get over the separation. There were new joys in her life books. She became a frequent visitor to the local library. Alana absorbed the works, got acquainted with the inner world of the classics, and through the prism of events in their novels and stories she rethought her fate. In her school years, Alana did not pay much attention to literature. All these works seemed boring to her, and she did not understand half of the words. However, apparently now it was the right moment for reading. In addition, Alana had a cat, Naomi, who turned out to be a very intelligent and affectionate animal. When Alana came home sad, Naomi would start rubbing against her legs as if trying to comfort her. And when the mistress felt tired, the cat became inaudible and unnoticeable. One cold fall evening, Alana prepared a delicious dinner for Naomi from leftover red fish and beef scraps. She took something from the table for herself, too. I wondered how much food was left over after working in the kitchen. It turned out to be a decent savings on food. Alana buttoned her jacket up to her chin and pulled her hat over her ears. She didn't feel like going outside. The wind was making the windows shake, and it looked like it was going to rain. But staying at work overnight wasn't an option. Naomi, her favorite book, and the soft couch were waiting for her at home. It was cozy and warm, though very lonely. It wasn't that far to walk, only a couple of blocks. Alana had chosen an apartment near the restaurant, saving not only on food but also on transportation. It was already dark outside. The evening was almost pitch black. It felt like winter was approaching. Soon the snow would fall, and the streets would become bright and colorful, and the New Year mood would appear. but so far it was dirty and slushy, uncomfortable. In such weather, I wanted to be home sooner. The streets were deserted. No wonder, because the cold, nasty rain had started. The icy wind burned my cheeks. As she passed the playground, which in the darkness looked like the set of a horror movie, Alana hurried home. When she heard that voice, a weak, trembling voice that sounded desperate, "Help, please. I'm hungry," Alana stopped. It was very unexpected to hear a voice clearly belonging to a small child on the street in this weather. There were no adults around, and Alana didn't see the owner of the thin voice either. "Can you help?" A girl came out of the cabin of the wooden-colored ship that stood proudly in the playground. A little girl altogether. She looked no more than 5 years old, huge, frightened brown eyes, plump lips, beautifully arched eyebrows. Tangled strands of brown hair were poking out from under a stretched cap. The girl was wearing a gray boy's jacket, which was 2 sizes too big for her. On her feet she wore sneakers that were worn almost to the ground. All indications were that she came from a poor family. If she had a family at all, she probably should. Children don't happen by themselves or grow up in an orphanage, or close adults raise them. The girl looked at Alana studyingly, as if trying to figure out whether she was friend or foe. What are you doing here?" Alana finally said. "Sitting, walking down the street." Suddenly it started raining and the wind picked up, so I hid here. Where are your parents?" "My mom died and my dad disappeared somewhere. First we took a long train ride with him. The train was great, it was warm. The bed was clean. There was plenty of food. We were going to Grandma's. That's what Dad said. And then we got off the train. Daddy told him to wait for him and left. So I went to look for him. Only he was nowhere to be found." "Why did you leave? Daddy must have come back for you, but he didn't find you. Now he's worried, running around looking for his daughter." I waited a long time. The little girl shook her head. "We got here this morning. I had already left the station at night when it got dark." That did seem strange. Alana could understand if the man had left his daughter for a few minutes to, I don't know, go to the bathroom or drop off things at the luggage room. But according to the girl, she waited for her parent all day. "He left me." I guess the little girl sighed. "Daddy doesn't love me. It's Mom loved, but she died already. And Daddy, I heard him tell a friend of his that I was a burden to him." "So what are we going to do with you now?" Alana didn't know what to do. Leaving the girl out here in the cold wasn't an option. That was for sure. Dragging the child to the police wasn't an option either. The baby needed a good dinner and a warm bed right now. She'd have to sit on some chair all night at the station while they drew up a report, while they figured out where to put her, while they called the guardian or whoever they called in such cases. "Let's go to my place now," Alana finally decided. "We'll eat, watch TV. I have a cat, you can play with it. And tomorrow we'll go to the police. And the police uncles will decide what to do with you." "The police?" The girl immediately tensed up. "You don't have to go to the police. I haven't done anything wrong." Alana realized that the little girl was afraid of policemen for something. Most likely she had transferred such an attitude to law enforcement representatives from her parents. Perhaps they were doing something criminal. It's very likely. Normal people don't put their children in this situation. "The cops are kind and good," Alana reassured the little girl. "We'll ask them to find your daddy." "Okay." Yes, the little girl nodded and added, "I'm really hungry. Auntie, do you have any sausage at home?" Alana's heart clenched with pity for this hungry, abandoned child. Somehow she reminded her of herself as a child, needed by no one, forgotten and abandoned by everyone. Alana held out her hand to the girl, who smiled and clung to it happily. Along the way, Alana and the girl got to know each other. She knew her name, Emma, but she couldn't say her last name. That was strange for a rather small child of 5. Emma told a little about her life. At first, the little girl lived with her mom and dad somewhere in a village or on the outskirts of a small town. Her parents apparently drank. Emma mentioned noisy companies, fights, people falling asleep on the floor, including complete strangers. And in all of this, a small, defenseless child was growing up. Listening to Emma, Alana thought about how lucky she was to be in her aunt's family as a child. And she wasn't exactly loved and certainly not spoiled. but she'd never witnessed a scene like Emma's, either. Emma was taken to work almost every day. As Alana understood it, her parents would take her to the center of a small town and leave her at a crosswalk to beg for alms. Emma was given a lot. Of course they did for such a doll. Brown eyes alone. In general, Emma had a hint of oriental blood-dark skin, coal black eyelashes and eyebrows. She looked like a beautiful, expensive doll. And she was not cherished, not appreciated. Emma should go to kindergarten, wear smart dresses, play with her friends. She is so energetic, smart, curious. But the girl had to spend her days in a dark underpass and beg for change from passers-by. "Didn't they hurt you there?" Alana asked. "Little could happen on the street to a small child?" No, Emma shook her head. "Everyone knew me in the crosswalk already, my uncle, the guitar player, and my aunt. She sold knitted socks in the crosswalk. And my dad often came to check up on me." In the evening, Emma's family returned home and went on as circumstances dictated. Sometimes Emma was left alone for a few days in an empty house. Her parents went out with someone. Other times, the company would gather at their place. Emma didn't know any other life, so she talked about everything that happened to her easily and casually. It was the norm for her. Meanwhile, Alana's hair was standing on her head in horror. What a lot of things had befallen a small child. And then Mommy died. Emma sighed. Daddy said it was bad vodka. And God saved him. He'd fallen asleep before that bottle was opened, so he survived. But Mom didn't sleep. So her friends got poisoned. Emma missed her mother very much. According to the girl, her parent loved her, treated her with candy, called her a beautiful princess, made beautiful ponytails. But sometimes she beat her, of course. It usually happened on days when Emma wasn't served enough. But if they served a lot, kissed and hugged, sang songs to her daughter and looked at her with kind eyes. Daddy's not like that. He never hugged me, and he never sang songs to me, and he never told me fairy tales. He doesn't love me, but still he's my daddy, and he takes care of me. Now he's lost or left me because he doesn't need me." They finally made it to Alana's apartment. "You come on in, don't be shy. See, Naomi's meeting us, already missed you." Emma seemed to be in a normal apartment for the first time. Everything here seemed unusual, strange and wonderful to her. Simple things made the little girl really excited. Like the lamp on the wall, or the toaster, or the bathroom. Alana immediately filled it to the brim with warm water to wash the girl. Everything. Alana wrapped Emma in her robe and carried her little guest into the kitchen. Dinner from an expensive restaurant was already waiting for her. Here, grilled vegetables, chicken kebab, fruit. At the sight of this variety, Emma was even confused. "Is this something you can eat?" "For me," she asked. You, Alana smiled. "You should try it. It's really good." Emma greedily pounced on the food. It was immediately apparent that the little girl had been starved. And then Alana put Emma to bed in a makeshift bed made from 2 upholstered armchairs. She didn't have a second bed in the apartment. "I love it so much at your place," the sleepy little girl admitted. "May my daddy never be found at all. I want to stay with you." These words echoed warmly in Alana's heart. She was pleased that Emma liked it at her place. On the other hand, one should never get attached to the little girl. She'd have to go to the police with her tomorrow anyway. That's a shame. What a pleasure it is to take care of a child, to see its happy eyes, to open the world to it. I can't tell you how it feels. Even if only for one evening, but Alana felt like a mother of a wonderful girl. In the morning, she had to dress up the baby in her old dirty clothes. There were no other clothes. Alana asked for time off work and explained the situation. They were sympathetic and gave her advice on how to talk to the police so that they would not think that a kind woman had taken someone else's child. Alana was surprised. She had never even thought of such a possibility. At the station, Alana went to the duty officer and told him her story. He, surprised, looked at the 2 visitors with his eyes and called someone. Then he called the number of the office and let the woman with the child behind the desk. The young man in shoulder straps listened to her, then asked Emma a few questions before writing down Alana's details and suggesting she go home. What about the girl? Alana was no longer indifferent to Emma's fate, especially since the girl clung so trustingly to her hand. How is it to go and leave her here with strangers? The little girl's been through enough. Can I take her? I promise I'll be in touch with you 24 hours a day, and I'll take the baby anywhere at the slightest need." The policeman shook his head negatively. You could see in his eyes that he'd love to help Alana and Emma, but he wasn't supposed to. "I want to take her away," the words came out of Alana's mouth before she could think. "To adopt her. If her parents can't be found, I'll take custody of the child, temporary, permanent, whatever, just so long as she's with me." "Are you sure?" The policeman looked at Alana in surprise. "More than sure. I don't want her in an orphanage or hospital. Let her go through all the necessary procedures at my place. I'll sign everything that needs to be signed. Certificates will be provided." "We'll keep that in mind." The policeman nodded and made some notes on the report. But Emma still had to spend about a month with strangers. First, she was admitted to the hospital in what was called the quarantine block. There, the girl was examined from top to bottom. It turned out that her health was excellent. Then Emma went to the orphanage. Alana visited the little girl almost every day. When Emma saw her, she would rush to her and hug her tightly. It was such a sweet moment. Alana always brought her some sweets or interesting toys. It was a joy to see the child's eyes light up with joy. All this time, Alana was preparing the documents for the adoption of the girl, collecting the necessary certificates, visiting the school of foster parents. She could not imagine that Emma would live with someone else. And the girl herself was drawn to Alana with all her soul. It's a pity that a 5-year-old's opinion won't be taken into account in court. If only she were 10. The search for Emma's father was not progressing. The orientation letters, interviews with possible witnesses, posters on the poles, and TV stories did not give any results. Emma's parents seemed to have fallen through the cracks. Alana was inclined to think that the little girl was right. The father had really abandoned his daughter, just left her at the train station in a strange city. A great plan if you want to never be found. Alana's adoption was going to be a problem. Single woman, no place of her own, low paycheck. Everything was looking up for Emma to be sent to an orphanage. Angry children, angry teachers of state rank. Alana could not imagine Emma, tender little Emma, in such conditions. Sure, the little girl had been through a lot in her 5 years, but she still had parents who took care of her as best they could. Yes, Alana realized that no one would really appreciate and love the girl in the orphanage. Her colleagues advised her to hire a lawyer specializing in such cases. The services of a professional cost a lot, but Alana even sold old jewelry, once given by Kevin, to pay for the work of a lawyer. The lawyer had to work hard, but in the end Alana received the court's opinion on Emma's adoption. For her, it was like a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. Now she and Emma would be together, and the girl would not end up in an orphanage. Alana immediately went to the orphanage to take Emma home. The girl even cried from joy, hugging Alana and saying that she would never come back here again. At home, Alana prepared everything for the arrival of the little girl: a new bed with linens, a closet with beautiful dresses, a desk. She fulfilled all the requirements of the guardianship authorities, creating a cozy and comfortable corner for Emma. And it gave Alana great joy to take care of the child, to choose toys and books for him. Alana's new life began. Emma turned out to be a wonderful child, perky, but able to keep herself in control, inquisitive and kind. She tried to take care of Alana, which moved the woman to tears. Alana had a family now, and she was happy. Emma finally went to kindergarten, where she immediately made many friends. The energetic, intelligent girl was always the center of attention. She invented games and activities that attracted children to her like a magnet. Alana couldn't get enough of her daughter. Emma didn't remember much about the past. It was as if she had decided to forget everything that had happened before she met Alana. And she had. Only sometimes she fidgeted restlessly in her sleep and soon calmed down. Probably all the same, in the subconscious remained some not too pleasant memories of life with her parents. But in the morning the girl could not say what she had dreamed. Alana was very careful to ask her about it, but she just shook her head. In due time, Emma went to school. And then it turned out that the girl has a great ability to do math. While others were solving simple examples, she, having coped with the obligatory part of the tasks, was studying Olympiad tasks for children a couple of grades older than herself. The teacher immediately recognized the talent of the little pupil and tried to develop it in every possible way. In middle school, Emma became interested in computer science and programming. Alana looked at her daughter and could not help but wonder how all these complex formulas and algorithms fit into the head of a 13-year-old. The woman herself was panicked by the sight of code, but Emma, with the keen look of a drummer, fingers on the keys, solved one complex problem after another. Emma became a prize winner of local and regional Olympiads more than once. Teachers believed that the girl had a great future. Alana was in solidarity with them. She was proud of her daughter and loved her very much. She was also worried about her daughter. Like any mother, this feeling was a bonus to the happiness of motherhood. There was no other way around it. Alana wondered how such a child could come from a family of marginalized people. These people abused booze, did not care about their daughter, did not engage in her development. The girl from an early age begged for alms in the underpass. Where did she get such abilities? It seemed strange to the woman. But there was no time to think about Emma's fate. Alana had to work even harder now. She wanted to dress Emma in beautiful, fashionable clothes, feed her daughter delicious and healthy food. She needed money for all that. So Alana did the best she could. It was hard to be alone, but the woman did not regret anything. On the contrary, she considered herself lucky. Fate had given her such a magnificent gift. It was an ordinary fall evening. Emma was already asleep with her hand under her cheek, just like when she was a child. Wow, how fast children grow up, Alana thought. 8 years had flown by. Emma had grown from a touching little girl into a beautiful young woman. Huge brown eyes, long shiny hair the color of melted chocolate. Slender, tall, dark-skinned. The admixture of Oriental blood gave the girl's appearance a special flavor. A beauty, and what a clever girl. Yes, nature had not been stingy, generously endowing Emma with everything at once. Alana smiled and returned to the laptop screen. The woman was trying to find the TV series she'd been told about at work. The search engine, as usual, produced a lot of unnecessary stuff. Alana was about to close the page, but then her eyes caught on a picture. The woman looked at it and could not believe her eyes. A teenage girl, slender, with long brown hair and a dazzling smile, posed in a bright pink swimsuit on the ocean. The wind ruffled the young beauty's hair. Behind her, the waves splashed, and it was Emma. The same facial features, the same smile, even the proportions of her figure were the same. But how was that possible? Her girl had never been to the sea. There's the ocean, white sand, palm trees. The longer she looked at this girl, the more she was surprised. The teenager didn't just look like her daughter. This was Emma. I could even see the mole on her thigh. Emma had one just like it, she thought. Alana pulled away from the screen and took a few deep breaths. This couldn't be a coincidence. Gathering her wits, Alana clicked on the photo. It opened the social network of one Nikita Gortsev. Apparently the girl was his daughter. On the page of this stranger there were more photos. Some of them had Sonia, so the name of the young beauty, posing against the ocean. Alana wasn't good at Russian, but she could understand it from the captions on the pictures. The family lived in a large and beautiful house, traveling. Father, mother, and daughter Sonia were a happy family. Sonia, who looked uncannily like Emma, attracted attention with her exotic beauty. The mixture of blood had a spectacular result. Alana could not take her eyes off Sonia, because the girl was an exact copy of Emma. Sonia's father apparently worked in the field of technology, as evidenced by the photos on his page. Interestingly, Emma also had a knack for programming. Alana made up her mind. She sent Nikita a letter in English without translating it through translators, attaching a few photos of Emma. In the letter, she told her girl's story. It could have all been a coincidence, but something told Alana that such coincidences simply do not happen. Nikita replied right away. He thanked Alana and asked her to stay in touch. He wrote that he couldn't tell her everything yet, but he wanted to meet her and was even ready to come to America for that. He was going to do it as soon as possible. Alana answered him and turned off her computer. What had just happened? Why did she immediately, without thinking about the consequences, wrote Nikita this letter? What would happen now? Alana's heart clenched with icy anxiety. She wanted to rewind time and not send a stranger from the internet that letter. But Alana had always acted in her daughter's best interests, believing that every decision she made would only benefit Emma. And this time Alana did the same, guided by her concern for Emma's future. The adoptive mother tried to give her daughter everything she could, but there was often not enough money for participation in competitions and tournaments, for traveling and new impressions. The possibility that a wealthy programmer from Moscow, who seemed to have some connection with the fate of Emma, could take part in the girl's life seemed unlikely, but so necessary. In the morning, after a restless night, Alana told Emma everything. The girl stared in wonder at the open social media pages, taking in the unknown details that seemed strangely familiar. "I think I remember these places. Or rather, not like that. I don't remember. But I dream about something like this house sometimes." Unsure, of course. Maybe just something similar, Emma pondered. Her remark about everyone having a double added a mystical tinge to the story. When Nikita flew in, the tension reached a climax. His interest in the details of Emma's fate, his desire to know every detail of how Alana had found the girl, had filled the meeting in the cafe with a sense of foregone conclusion. Nikita was completely different from Emma, tall, trim, with blue eyes and blonde hair. His appearance was not associated with the dark-haired, brown-eyed girl. What had happened during this encounter? Could Nikita have shed light on the unusual resemblance between Sonia and Emma? Is there some deep, hitherto unknown connection behind it? The questions were many, and the answers were bound to follow. The world Alana and Emma were entering promised to be filled with new discoveries, and perhaps changes that would change their lives for the better once and for all. And yet the attentive Alana noticed the similarities, the dimple in Nikita's cheeks when he smiled, and his eyes. The man nodded in the exact same way. Even his nose seemed to wrinkle in the same way. It turned out that Nikita knew English. He had worked for a long time with English developers and had learned the language. Of course, the man confused words and cases and spoke with a strong accent, but Alana understood him perfectly. "This is just an incredible story," Nikita pronounced as they settled at a corner table. "I couldn't believe my eyes at first when I saw your daughter's picture. What a blessing that you wrote to me." Alana nodded. She wasn't sure she had done the right thing. It seemed to her that her life was taking another turn. Things were about to change abruptly again, and not for the better. She felt like she might lose Emma. The feeling was strong, and of course she already guessed that Emma was no stranger to this man. Nikita made a pleasant impression. He was handsome, polite, energetic, and very friendly. Alana almost physically felt the warmth emanating from him. There was nothing repulsive or suspicious about him to fear or antipathy. And then he told his story. Alana caught every word greedily. A lot of things fell into place now. The puzzle was coming together, but what to do next? Jonathan was a talented programmer. After high school, he moved to Moscow, where he first attended university and then got a job. He bought a house, married the beautiful Maria. His career was going uphill. The young, talented programmer was entrusted with complex projects, and one day he got into a team that cooperated with developers from America. They all worked together on a grandiose international project. In his personal life, Nikita also had everything going as well as possible. The young family was born at once 2 twin girls. Nikita and his wife Maria were happy, healthy, beautiful daughters, financial prosperity, love and mutual understanding between spouses. What more could one wish for? When little girls Sonia and Kira were 2 years old, Nikita was sent on a business trip to California. It was necessary to solve several work issues, a matter of a few hours a day. The man still had a lot of time left to get acquainted with this beautiful city. "So I made the huge mistake of asking Maria and the girls to come with me," he recalls. "That trip was supposed to be an exciting journey, but it turned out to be a real nightmare for our family. At first, everything was going just fine. Nikita would drive 2 or 3 hours to the office in the morning and then spend the entire day with his family walking around California. They visited the zoo and gallery together, walked around the center. True, having 2 young children meant more than just doting, joy and happiness. Both young parents were tired, which was probably what caused them to let their guard down. It happened in a huge, beautiful park with fountains, wide, flat paths and playgrounds. There were a lot of people in the park that sunny day, no surprise, since the weather was great and the weekend was ahead. Parents seemed to have decided to take their children out for a walk. Nikita was holding Sonia's hand and thought that his wife was also holding Kira's hand. But Maria and his daughter disappeared from his sight for a while. The sea of people had swept them in different directions, Kira had always been more curious and energetic than Sonia, always running somewhere, climbing. Maria was better at handling her. I thought Kira was dragging her wife off to find adventure again. It happened so often. I wasn't worried at all, Nikita continued. 5 or 6 minutes passed, no more. When Nikita finally saw Maria, she was standing at the monument, looking around for her family. Seeing Nikita, the woman smiled and rushed towards him. She was alone, without Kira. Nikita tensed, of course, but didn't panic yet because, well, little else, maybe Kira stayed on the swings or goes like a tail behind her mother's back and just can't be seen. "Where's Kira?" she asked anxiously, looking at her husband. And then Nikita realized everything and jumped up in horror. Maria thought that Kira was with him, and he thought that the daughter had stayed with his wife. The little girl was lost, and it had been about 7 minutes, if not more. How do we find her in this huge park with so many people? What to do? These questions instantly filled his head. Nikita immediately called the police. The call was responded to lightning fast, because it was about the disappearance of a small child. An outfit arrived at the park. At first, everyone hoped that the girl quickly found just lost, just wandering somewhere along the paths, admiring the surroundings, studying the world. It was quite in the character of Kira. But the little girl, as if in the water, rolled into the water. It soon became clear that something had happened to her. We had to return home after a month, Nikita continued. We left with nothing. We didn't know where our little girl was or what had happened to her. It was horrible. We can't even find words to describe our condition with Maria. We couldn't find a place to sleep. We couldn't sleep. We couldn't sleep. We didn't eat anything, and we blamed each other. He told how he was constantly in touch with law enforcement, even hiring private detectives. They worked on the case too, but not a single lead. As the years passed, there was little hope of finding Kira. Sonia grew from a little girl into a beautiful young woman. Looking at her, Maria and Nikita could only imagine what their Kira looked like now. Maria always felt that Kira was alive. Nikita shook her head. She didn't doubt it, and she was right, Alana pronounced. Emma is Kira. There could be no doubt about that. Then, years ago, the little girl was taken from the park. The girl was probably too young to pronounce her name correctly. And the people who took her decided her name was Emma, not Kira. Well, or they just called her their own name. Emma didn't remember anything. She was just a little girl, barely 2 years old. She gradually got used to the new mommy and daddy and learned the language. Their goal, apparently, was to make her not just a well-behaved child, but a full-fledged member of society. It was probably for this purpose that the girl was taken away. But then something went wrong. Emma's mother died, and the father, perhaps having found another way to earn money, realized that the girl no longer interested him. So he brought her to the train station, far from the city, where he left her mercilessly. Then Emma was found by Alana. All this time in Moscow, the girl's real parents found no place for themselves. They, of course, had to learn to live with this loss, but I know I could not. I didn't even want to imagine what Maria and Nikita had endured, to know nothing about the fate of their own child. Yeah, it would drive you crazy, Alana thought. Especially they may have been saved by the fact that they still had another daughter, Sonia. She was the one they were holding on to. And then I get this letter from you, Alana. And I see a picture of Emma. I'm sure your Emma is Kira. I haven't told my wife anything yet. I need to check it out first, do a DNA test to be sure. If there is a mistake, Maria is unlikely to stand for it. Nikita continued. There was no mistake, of course. The analysis confirmed Emma and Nikita's parentage. I honestly told everything to my daughter. The woman was naturally worried. Everyone realized that now that Emma's birth family had been found, Alana would be alone again. How am I supposed to live without my daughter now? How do I tear her from my heart? Alana agonized. But I have to do it. Emma is not my property. It is important that she lives with her blood relatives. With them, she will get more than I can offer. A brilliant future indeed awaits her with them. And so I watch as Emma begins to socialize with Nikita. You can immediately sense a kindred spirit in their interactions. Emma spoke to her father as if the years of separation had never happened. They laughed at the same jokes, discussed programming languages, argued over solving complex Olympiad problems, understood each other with half a word, even with half a look. I immediately realized that Emma was 100% Daddy's daughter. The woman wasn't jealous. No, she was happy for the girl. Emma's going to be really happy now. The paperwork took a while to finalize. Emma continued to live with Alana. Nikita preferred to stay in a hotel so as not to embarrass the hostess. They saw each other every day, walked, talked, discussed the future. Emma is leaving with her father. It was already a settled matter. The girl looked forward to seeing her mother and especially her sister Sonia. She was a little worried, but she lived the days before departure in joyful anticipation. After all, the girl would soon have a whole new life. But it was hard for Emma to part with Alana, the man who had raised her. "How will I be without you?" the girl sighed in the evenings. "I don't know what's happening to me. I seem to want to leave as soon as possible, to see how things work there, to meet my mother and sister. But I won't be happy without you." "We'll get used to it," Alana smiled. "And then, we'll see each other. I'll fly to visit you and you'll visit me here sometimes. Oh, and Skype's still on too." "It's not like that, you realize that." Of course, Alana understood. She tried her best not to show Emma her sadness. Alana was used to having such a sweet little girl in her life. She had raised her, considered her a daughter, but that didn't give her the right to make Emma her property. Alana had made the decision that was most favorable to Emma, and now she had no doubt that she'd done the right thing. And then Emma and Nikita flew away. A cold emptiness appeared in Alana's soul at the same moment. Yes, once again a woman was starting a new life, and it would take some getting used to. Emma wrote and called often. She quickly learned the language and made friends. In fact, Alana had no doubt that she would. Emma talked about how much fun she was having in the new place, but she always ended the conversation by saying how much she missed Alana. If only she knew how much Alana missed her. A few months passed and New Year's Eve came. This time Alana decided not to decorate the tree. She always did it for Emma. Why would she do it now? Alana was spending the holiday alone. She'd been invited to a party, but she declined. She wasn't in the mood right now. She wanted peace, quiet, comfort. She wanted to sit quietly, watch the New Year's program on TV and think about her own thoughts. Just at that moment, there was a signal that someone wanted to chat with Alana on Skype. The woman smiled. It was Emma, of course. There was no one else. Indeed, a smiling, sweet face appeared on the screen. Emma's eyes were shining, as always. Sonia loomed over her shoulder. Alana still couldn't get used to the fact that the sisters looked so much alike. They had become inseparable since their reunion. Emma wished Alana a happy new year, wished her happiness and good luck, told her again that she missed her, and then said that Nikita wanted to talk to her. Alana wasn't surprised. She often talked to both him and Maria. They told her about how things were going with Emma and constantly thanked her for saving their baby girl. Nikita probably wants to wish her a happy new year. There's nothing special about it. But from Nikita's face, Alana somehow immediately guessed that her life was kind of ready to take another sharp turn. The man looked too serious and determined. The woman's stomach even churned with an incomprehensible premonition. Nikita actually wished her a happy new year. And then, "Kira misses you very much." "Very much," he said, looking into Alana's eyes. "She has everything to be happy, but she's still not completely happy. She misses you," Nikita began. "Maria and I thought it would pass. We could just call each other, visit each other. But you two seem to have formed a strong bond. Kira, it literally splits in two. One part is reaching across the ocean to you, and the other part wants to stay with us. The children's doctor said it's very dangerous to her health." So then Nikita made Alana an offer she just couldn't refuse. It turns out that not far from them sold a few years ago a small house with a plot of land. And Nikita bought it, counting on the fact that Sonia, having lost one of their daughters, will stay to live with them, even after becoming an adult. So we bought this house, where, according to our plan, adult Sonia was to live with her husband and children. But Sonia and Kira are still just kids. Besides, they both already said they're not going to live in our neighborhood. They both have grandiose plans to conquer the world, and our cozy neighborhood is too crowded for them, you see. Anyway, the house was idle. "We're asking you to move in," Nikita finished. Alana looked at Nikita in silence. She didn't even know what to say. His words were too good to be true. Is she really going to live next to Emma? Yes, she'll have to get used to everything new, learn the language. But that doesn't matter. If Alana gets a chance to talk to her girl every day. There are jobs for you here. A lot of families need a nanny. You have experience. Besides, there are a lot of restaurants here that are always in need of kitchen helpers. Kira said you're the one for the job. Nikita continued. So are you going to take it? There's nothing keeping you in your town. And this way you'll be close to Kira. The girl is very attracted to you. She needs you, and we need you. Maria and I also want to do something good for the man who saved our daughter. We're one family. Now the house sits idle for nothing anyway. You'll take care of it too, so you'll help us a lot. So what do you think of my offer? Nikita looked at Alana hopefully and waited for an answer. She probably should have said that she needed to think about it, to weigh the pros and cons. But why? After all, the decision had already taken shape in her head. This was just great news. Of course I agree, Alana said without a shadow of a doubt. Her answer was full of determination and joy. The prospect of living near Emma and becoming even closer to the family that had welcomed her so warmly seemed like a marvelous opportunity. It wasn't just an offer to move in, it was a chance to start a new life where she would not only take care of the house, but also help with Emma's upbringing, support her, and be there to experience all the important moments of her life. Nikita smiled back, feeling relieved and happy about her decision. That's wonderful, Alana. We're so excited to have you become a part of our life here on a permanent basis. Kira will be thrilled. It was a new beginning for Alana, full of promise and opportunity. A new page in her life was opening before her, filled with family warmth, new challenges, and most importantly, the happiness of being close to those she loves.
Anything could be going on in the world, but passions were simmering in businessman John's mansion. And why the hell take responsibility for a child if you can't take care of it? Muttered a young woman with a pretty but unkind face. She was packing an 8-year-old girl for school, and you couldn't tell from her face that she was enjoying the process. Accidentally, or maybe on purpose, Selena pulled a strand of her hair in a dragon braid. Careful, the girl asked, not very politely. Selena only rolled her eyes, and the elderly, half-paralyzed man lying on the bed sighed heavily. That sigh only added fuel to the fire, and the woman continued to rant. Do you think I need this? No, you don't. You take care of her yourself, or you'll be lying in a state. And I have to run around you. Selena, I understand, John said quietly, but the girl needs a mother's affection, and I can barely walk. The old man sighed again. There was so much sadness and hopelessness in that sigh that it seemed that a stone would shake, but not Celine's heart, if she had one, of course. Selena was the second daughter-in-law of John, a well-known businessman in town, and the wife, or rather, now widow of his son Jacob, his son's first wife. Anna was a kind, calm, friendly woman. John did not remember Anna being in a bad mood. She was a housekeeper, but she was by no means a typical kitchen cleaner in a greasy bathrobe and a nest on her head. The house was in exemplary order and there was always hot food. Anna looked as if she had stepped out of a housewares advertisement. Anna died in childbirth. The inconsolable widower didn't want to live, but he still had little Julia. That's who was worth living for. The young father took care of his daughter as best he could, but John said from time to time, "You should meet a nice woman. Julia needs a mother. She's a girl. And boys don't need a mother." Jacob grinned sadly. "Boys need a mother too," he agreed, "but girls need a mother more." Jacob realized that too, but it wasn't easy to find a woman willing to take care of someone else's child, and yet there was one. Selena was nothing like Anna, but she was undoubtedly beautiful too. But unlike Jacob's first wife, she wasn't a very good housekeeper, and her temper wasn't very good. And that was putting it mildly. If Anna could enjoy any little thing, Selena, on the contrary, was always dissatisfied. Jacob and Selena were in the same class, and they liked each other during their school years. After high school, as it usually happens, their paths diverged, but it so happened that fate brought them together again. One day, after negotiations in a business hotel, Jacob decided to have lunch at his favorite restaurant, which was located on the basement floor. The young entrepreneur entered the restaurant, and the first thing that caught his eye was a luxurious waterfall of silky golden blonde hair. A few seconds later, Jacob saw the face of its owner. "Selenka," he exclaimed, seeing his high school sweetheart. "What a reunion." "Jacob." Selena smiled, gracefully holding out her hand to him. "How many years, how many winters?" "Many, Selena, many. You look great. What are you doing here?" "This is my friend's restaurant. She invited me here. She should be here any minute. And let me guess, you were at the negotiation." "You're not psychic, are you?" Jacob laughed. Selena said, smiling, "It's really quite simple. All the businessmen of the city come here after business negotiations. Well, as for you, Billy Smirnov told me that you're in business, so it's not hard to make the comparison." "Well, yes," he nodded and, obeying a sudden impulse, suggested, "Celine, why don't I see you sometime? How about dinner at a restaurant?" "What an idiot," he chided himself. "Who told you she was single? Such a beauty." However, Selena agreed to meet, and the former classmates exchanged phone numbers. They met a couple days later, and when Jacob told Selena about his widowhood, the ex-lover just shook her head. "Poor you, I can only imagine what you've been through. I'm divorced." Jacob asked his ex to dance, and Selena laughed softly. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing's wrong," she smiled. "I just remembered when you asked me to dance in the 10th grade and kicked me in the legs." Jacob couldn't take it anymore and laughed. "I've been dancing ever since, thank God. I've noticed. You're a really good dancer." "Well, it's the position, isn't it?" That dinner was the beginning of their relationship, which eventually turned into a legal marriage. Selena, though faithfully attending to Julia, kept the little girl at a distance. At first, the girl had been drawn to her, but the young woman was determined not to allow any callow tenderness. Jacob was offended by this, but deep down he knew that it was impossible to make someone else's child love him. Not every man was capable of it anyway, so Jacob was grateful to Selena for taking care of his princess as best she could. A year after the wedding, Jacob died in a car accident. He bequeathed all his assets to Julia. In the event of his death before the adulthood of his daughter, Jacob's property was to be managed by Selena, who he appointed as Julia's guardian. This arrangement suited the young widow just fine. She stayed in John's house and represented the interests of the orphan girl. Selena was confused only one thing. When her stepdaughter turned 18, all the worldly goods would pass to her. Selena had been smart enough not to show her dislike for her stepdaughter when Jacob was alive. But after Jacob's death, she didn't bother. Selena often called Julia a spawner. The stepmother's lack of love was compensated for by John's love. But Selena was ready to glare at the little girl as soon as the old man turned his back. In time, Julia began to respond to the evil stepmother in the same way, but thick-skinned Selena did not care. So what a tomalicious little brat. John adored his granddaughter, such a little one, and she's already been through so much, the old man thought, and his heart burst with pity, first her mother, then her father. And this snake hisses at her, thinking that I do not notice anything. John spoiled Julia in every way he could. He took her to the park, children's caves, shopping, and entertainment centers, and did it with great pleasure. But unfortunately, a few months ago, John had a car accident, as a result of which he almost lost the ability to walk normally and became ill. After the old man was discharged from the hospital, Julia spent almost all the time in his room. "In fact, everything is not so hopeless," assured the doctor. "Your body will recover. But given your age, it will take time. I can't rule out the possibility of surgical intervention. All in all, it's not that bad." But what kind of treatment can we talk about when the daughter-in-law was eating Julia with a hateful look? Leaving the girl alone with Selena would be pure madness. Who knows what her sister-in-law might think? John, despite his unenviable position, ran the business by phone and internet. All issues requiring the direct presence of the head, the businessman entrusted the manager Harry, who, by the way, readily joined the case. John was not left with the feeling that he had been waiting for this moment. When Jacob's death was only a few months old, Julia didn't quite understand what had happened. She waited every day for her daddy to come back. But daddy never came back, and Julia grew up and realized that it would never happen. "Selena, why don't you like Julia so much?" John asked me one day. "Why does she always stick her nose where it doesn't belong?" Selena grumbled and suddenly stopped talking. The older man raised his eyebrows in surprise, but said nothing. He understood. The reason for dislike for the girl money, which daughter-in-law can dispose of only for the time being. But there was something else. Julia couldn't do math, and she always came home from school dissatisfied. "Betty said I was useless," her granddaughter complained. John frowned. Telling a child that she is useless is uneducational, to say the least. By the way, the daughter-in-law worked as an accountant and, according to her, received a diploma with honors. So, maybe? "Oh, no, please." Selena waved her hands. "Well, what kind of math teacher am I? I've already forgotten everything." "Well, you'll remember at the same time." "And I need it," thought the daughter-in-law. She was not at all smiling to do math with her 8-year-old stepdaughter. And then there are tutors for that. That's what we'll dance from, Selena realized. "John, but a tutor will do a much better job than me," she said. The father-in-law looked at his daughter-in-law carefully and thought she was probably right. John took everything about his beloved granddaughter seriously. And the question of Julia's education was one of the most important to him. "That's right," he reasoned. "I'd only got one granddaughter, so why trust her to someone professional?" And yet there were doubts. Hiring a tutor is, first of all, letting a stranger into the house. Who knows what's on his mind? "John, I beg you," said the daughter-in-law with a grin, afraid that the old man might change his mind. "He'll do it. Do you really think the agency will keep thieves and other trash?" When John went to the agency, he asked the agency for questionnaires of all the applicants in the field he was interested in. As a bedridden invalid, he didn't have time to go to all those agencies. "What is this nonsense?" Selena muttered, annoyed. She had noticed many times that things in the house were always out of place. Once a young woman had hung a blouse on the back of a chair, and when she had decided to move it to the closet, she had found it missing. The first thing Selena saw when she opened the closet was the blouse. It was like a poltergeist at work. She shook her head. Another time, a good half of the cutlets were missing from the skillet. A fresh loaf of bread, bought after work, had been cut off while Selena was taking a bath. Sometimes she had some suspicion, but the young woman brushed it aside for some reason. "Maybe I'm just tired," she decided. John studied the resumes of tutors for elementary school students. His intuition had helped the old man in critical situations more than once. One glance at a photo of an applicant was enough to realize whether or not that tutor was a good fit for his granddaughter. Having rejected a couple of dozen potential math teachers for Julia, John sighed heavily, thinking that they were not all serious. And these were teachers. With only 5 applicants left, John decided to moderate his pickiness. And when he lost all hope of finding a tutor for his favorite, he suddenly liked Angelica, a very young girl. Not 18, of course, but a fresh and youthful enough face. A recent graduate, most likely, John thought. And after reading the questionnaire of the applicant, he was convinced that he was right. The girl had indeed graduated from the math department of the university in the last academic year. On the photo, Angelica, unlike the other applicants, looked quite modest, her blonde hair slicked back, no makeup or jewelry. The girl's profile was at the very end of the list. An outsider, Mickey mentally summarized, and no references. Although where would they come from if she's straight out of university? The businessman caught himself defending the girl. For some inexplicable reason, the elderly businessman really liked her picture. Besides, John always liked to give to people who needed to get a grip on at least some opportunity. He had been one himself, so John wrote to Angelica. She wrote back about 5 minutes later. I'm sure she stayed on her computer waiting for a reply. Because of her lack of references, Angelica was willing to work for a piece of bread and a bowl of soup. According to the applicant, she was in dire need of money. Her fiancé needed a good lawyer. A good lawyer, John chuckled to himself. Working for food is hardly the way to raise money for a good lawyer. I wish I could see her for myself, this miracle of nature. Money for a lawyer for the groom. Despite his ironic thoughts, John already had a lot of respect for Angelica. Pretty's intuition told the businessman, This girl is what he needs. Among other things, in the column additional skills was indicated that she plays the violin, which finally won the heart of the elderly businessman. The thing is that in this respect, Angelica was close to him in spirit. When then, a long time ago, John went to music school and even in all seriousness dreamed of a career as a musician. But unfortunately, the situation in the country did not dispose to it. Another computer chirp, which meant a new message from an interested applicant, did not allow him to recollect. Angelica wrote that she was willing to meet at any time convenient for John. Well, here in glorious, thought John, and not thinking long, offered the girl to come to his home. When Angelica saw the elderly man bedridden, she felt uneasy. "Don't worry, you won't have to carry the ducks for me," he winked, intercepting the girl's gaze. "I didn't think anything of the sort," Angelica replied, embarrassed. John nodded and began the interview. Julia entered the room. After about 10 minutes, the girl whispered something in the old man's ear, and then he said, "You are accepted." "Really?" rejoiced Angelica, "but you've asked almost nothing yet." "Really," John assured her, and smiling he added, "Consider that the chief warden has approved your candidacy. So from tomorrow, you can start work." Angelica faithfully performed tutoring duties in the house John and Julia in her soul did not like. She enjoyed every minute she spent with her teacher. "This child definitely needs love," Angelica stated. Julia reached out to her like a flower to the sun, and the girl reciprocated. "Grandfather," said Julia one day at dinner, "I want Angelica to live with us. Can we?" Selena snorted, but John inquired, "Angelica, would you really move in with us?" "I don't even know," the tutor muttered embarrassedly. "Is that convenient?" "I'll say more," John smiled. "It would be more convenient for everyone. You wouldn't have to spend money on transportation. Meals are on the inviting party." Selena shook her head disapprovingly, but no one paid any attention to her. It wasn't enough for her to eat at the sick man's bedside, but the old fool wanted to put up another spomber. "Whom am I to be fed by you?" Angelica was finally embarrassed, as if she had overheard the thoughts of her employer's daughter-in-law. "Well, you can contribute to the food supply," said John, remembering the girl's words that she was ready to work for food. "Go for it. You won't regret it." "But I have my own apartment." "That's great," smiled the businessman. "You can rent it out. I think, in your situation, additional income will not be superfluous." "It's true," thought Angelica. "How could I not have thought of it before?" Thus, the question of the tutor living in John's house was resolved positively. One day, John called the tutor, as he put it, just for a chat. "Since you're living in my house, it wouldn't be a bad idea to get to know each other, would it?" "Well, yes," Angelique smiled. "Angelique, if I recall correctly, you play the violin?" "Yes," she nodded. "Would you play something for me?" "Really?" exclaimed the girl. "The last time I picked up an instrument was 2 years ago." "Angelica, I assure you, it doesn't matter," assured the businessman. "Your hands will remember everything." "I also want Angelica to play the violin," said Julia, who had already managed to climb onto her grandfather's bed. "Well, please." The tutor was reluctant, but she took the violin and began to play a tune. John suddenly felt hot. It was a very beautiful and sad melody. From the very first chords, it touched the heart, and the old man's heart shrank. And after a minute, John clearly realized that the melody was familiar to him. At first, the entrepreneur even thought he was having an auditory hallucination. "No, it just can't be," John thought, realizing somewhere that it could be. The melody enveloped his whole being, and then smoothly picked up and transported him back to a time when John was still young and full of hope. Many years ago, as an 8th grader, John decided to devote his life to music, but life made its own adjustments. After school, he entered the conservatory, but did not pass the competition and fell under the fall draft. After the army, John again decided to try his luck. By the time of his return from the army, in the city opened a new music school. The guy applied there, and this time he succeeded. Moreover, John graduated from the school with honors, but decided not to stop there and applied to the conservatory. The diploma with honors did its job, and yesterday's graduate of the music school noticed. Teachers said that he had a real talent. John was not the only student endowed with talent. There was also Mallory, the girl he fell in love with. By the way, John honestly thought she was more talented than he was. Or did it seem that way to the young man because he was in love? At the evening of awarding diplomas, John confessed his love to Mallory, and the young people began to meet. They decided that they would get married in some wooden country church. All friends wondered when the wedding would take place, but the lovers were not destined to marry. Everyone John knew was sure he was going to be a star, but promotion cost a lot of money, which he didn't have. Perestroika struck, and the 90s came. There were many unsuccessful attempts to find a permanent job in his specialty, but all failed. John planned to talk seriously about marriage, but he felt guilty. What could he offer Mallory besides his love? John worked part-time in restaurants, gambled in the crosswalk, and money was in and out. Why are you fooling around? His school friend Alexander told him once, "You can't live on music nowadays. Come and join us. You'll earn money for your wedding, and you'll have enough to live on. Sabrina and I went on vacation in Turkey a week ago, and if you work for us, you'll be able to afford such a trip." What can I say? The offer was tempting. And indeed, thought John, it would be nice to fly with Mallory to Turkey or somewhere else. I'll surprise her. Alexander worked in a rapidly growing firm selling audio, video, and home appliances, which in those years actively imported from abroad, and his business was booming. A school friend put in a good word for John, and the management never once regretted that they gave a chance to a graduate musician who was out of business. Truth be told, John didn't like the business that much, but it was the business that allowed John to survive in those difficult times. But as it turned out, Mallory thought otherwise. It would seem that nothing can interfere with their happiness, but the favorite girl turned out to be unusually principled. "Oh, John, you buried your talent in the ground," sadly stated her beloved. "Yes, I did not bury anything," John objected. "Now everyone survives as they can." "Business is so dirty," sighed Mallory. "Let me disagree with you. Yes, business is not creative, it's routine. But let's look at it from a different angle. Traveling abroad and useful acquaintances with foreign partners, well, isn't it a tempting prospect? I'll save up for the wedding and we'll have the ultimate party. Is that bad?" "John, I don't care what our wedding will be," she said fervently. "The main thing is that we'll be together. We'll devote our lives to art and travel all over the world." "With what money?" John grinned bitterly. "And then you see who is now prosperous and can afford all the goods of the earth. Businessmen. My uncle, the historian, assures me that the situation in the country will get better soon. And not only businessmen will be able to afford trips abroad. We just have to be patient." "Why should I be patient?" It seems that for the first time in their relationship, he started to turn on. "Why, tell me? Why live badly when you can live well?" You shook your head regretfully. "You haven't understood anything." "I don't get it," said John. And Mallory just turned around and walked away. He, of course, made attempts to reconcile, but his beloved was adamant. "Mallory does not want to see me," in despair said John Sashka. Young Green grinned. "Friend, in your Mallory is still alive youthful maximalism, but it passes. Love is love, but man is an earthly creature, and he needs food and clothing. So my friend, I hope we have some more wedding salads." Alexander turned out to be a bad visionary. The salads didn't work out that way. At least not at John and Mallory's wedding, who was adamant. Then one day John decided, "After all, I have my pride too." The couple eventually broke up. Eventually, as John got involved in the business, he realized that he was doing something not so boring. After working for the company for 3 years, John decided to start his own business. He succeeded. As for marriage, it happened much later. His wife Victoria was a very beautiful woman, but over time John realized that he and she could not become each other's kin. There was no warmth in the soul. On top of that, Victoria could not get pregnant for a long time. At the service of the wealthy couple were the most famous doctors in the United States, but the stars were clearly not on their side. "Unfortunately, we are not gods," divorced Barry, one of the best capital gynecologists. And then John's wife decided to resort to unconventional medicine. What the hell? They bypassed several fortune tellers, but they could not please them. John and Victoria did not give up, and eventually their patience was rewarded. Their attempts at parenthood had succeeded. It was a good witch doctor, or nature finally took mercy on the couple. But one day Victoria proudly announced to her husband that he would become a father. John was then already 39, his wife a year less. Despite the birth of a long-awaited son, a few years later the spouses of John divorced. John, being a generous and noble man, determined ex-spouse for life maintenance. But Mallory, he never saw him again. There were rumors that his Zasnova went to another city. Sometimes the elderly businessman thought that it was necessary to give in to Mallory, or better yet, find a compromise. Although what was there to say about it now? The melody awakened memories in the elderly man, long ago hidden in a far corner and locked on 7 locks, memories, and for good reason. After all, the author of the melody, which played Angelica, was the same girl from the past. He could not be mistaken. How does Angelique know that tune? Wondered John. Angelica is quite young, but Mallory must be in her 60s. What if she's my daughter? No, it doesn't add up. She's a recent university graduate, and Mallory and I broke up much earlier. John didn't even realize he was crying right away. Grandpa, why are you crying? Julia asked when the tune ended. Are you sick? No, John smiled through his tears. On the contrary, I feel very good. Angelica, please answer me one question. How do you know this tune? I learned it from a very good music teacher. I was referred to her by the orphanage. Mallory taught me the basics. By the way, she and I are still friends. Angelica smiled and added sadly, and also me and Vanya, her son, was engaged. That is, we were engaged, but Mallory. Now John was sure. The mysterious music teacher could well be his first bride. However, there was no such thing as 100% certainty. How many women in the world have the name Mallory? After all, if his former fiancée taught music, it is quite logical that she could teach this tune to anyone. So the businessman decided to make the gentlest possible inquiries about her tutor. Yes, I remember, you said. John nodded and moved on to the subject at hand. She was a very nice woman indeed. Well, if you're engaged to her son. Very nice. Angelique nodded with a smile. It was a pity she was in serious trouble. Her son is in prison and her grandson has been sent to an orphanage. Mallory tried to defend him, but she was rejected because of his age. So your fiancé is in trouble with the law? Mickey asked sympathetically. No, Angelica sighed. It's not like that. Well, how? The businessman needed maximum information, so he clarified everything, down to the smallest detail. In the end, John learned that the daughter-in-law of supposedly his former lover turned out to be a cuckoo. She gave birth to a son, Archie, and left him for her husband, that is, Evan. The spouses divorced, and a year later Evan met Angelica. Young people dreamed of getting married, but something happened that they did not expect. Evan worked as a security guard at a meat processing plant, and one day saw something that was not meant for his eyes. 5 men, led by the plant manager, were loading pork and beef carcasses into a truck. Eventually, the robbery was pinned on Evan. Allegedly, he was the tipster and was directly involved in the theft. Evan's a tipster, the tutor grinned sadly, but he wouldn't have taken the wad of bills in front of him. Once he and I were walking along the promenade and found a purse full of large bills. So he literally asked every passerby if he had lost the wallet. The old man was shocked. Yes, he said thoughtfully, it would be funny if it were not so sad. Angelica, I have a strange request for you. Would you mind bringing this woman to me? John, said the girl timidly, with all my respect for you, I don't think it's very convenient at the moment. Mallory is hardly in the mood for visits at the moment. Well, really? I don't mean to be intrusive, but this is very important to me, John insisted. I understand. Angelica nodded with a slight smile, but maybe sometime later. I don't think there could be a better time. What's more, I think I can help her. Angelica, it's a matter of life and death. Well, if it's a matter of life and death, the girl could not resist a smile, this time wide and sincere. Angelica, either you tell me what's what or no visit, said Mallory. Who is he, this mysterious patron? Does he have a name? The tutor faltered. John had asked Angelica not to give his name. She respected the man and was determined to do as he asked. But on the other hand, Mallory really wasn't going anywhere. The woman was still as principled as she had been years ago. All right, the girl decided. He'd actually asked not to be named. So, you'll? I understand, smiled the music teacher. Let it be our little female secret. So who is he? John. The name struck Mallory like a whip. No, more like a flash of lightning. Wow, I thought I'd forgotten about him, the older woman thought. Angelica, the older woman said in a squeezed voice. Well, I'll go and see your employer. Older, like me, a little better, but still the same eyes, thought John, looking at Mallory. And suddenly, in place of the staid old woman appeared a young graduate of a music school with burning eyes. Well, hello, Mallory. John greeted the one who really turned out to be his former fiancée. Good afternoon, John, she smiled. John thought the businessman fondly, just like back then. Angelica, realizing that these two were obviously not just good acquaintances, delicately left the room. Well, tell me, what do you live? What do you breathe? John smiled back. Me? Retired, but still teaching. Strangely enough, I still get students. What's so strange about that? I always knew you were talented. You are too, but... Mallory was awkwardly silent, but her former lover understood everything and continued with a smile. I remember, I buried my talent in the ground. God knows, Mallory not once scolded himself for his integrity, from which did not work out in the second marriage. She caught her husband with a mistress and couldn't forgive. John don't, shook her head. The old woman, do you think I've never regretted it? And now here we are. Oh God. Mallory suddenly cried bitterly. Mallory, what's wrong? John asked worriedly. Angelica told me that you have problems. Trouble. The woman sobbed. It's a disaster. But it's really not his fault. Evan is not capable of such a thing. Olga, tell me everything in order, John asked softly. Seriosa, I spell you, exclaimed Mallory. If you really have the ability, help him. After all, this is your son too. At first, John did not even immediately understand what his ex-fiancée told him. What son? And when he realized the meaning of what was said, the older man looked at Mallory in amazement. He is my son, John slowly said. That is, when we broke up with you? The elderly musician found it difficult to speak, and she only nodded frequently. Yes, John, repented Mallory. I was expecting a child from you, but I found out about it later, and you kept silent all that time. Yes, she said through her tears, I'm sorry. It's all because of my stupid principle. What is there to say about it now? John said bitterly, tears welling up in his eyes. I'll definitely help Ivan. After all, I owe him, and a lot. My fault, the ex-fiancé said quietly. It doesn't matter, John replied with a sigh, holding out his hand to her. Despite his helpless position, John quickly got the right people involved and took care of the matter. Are you sure everything will be all right? He asked his lawyer, and after hearing the answer, he sighed in relief and passed out. There was a knock at the door of his room. Come in. His sister-in-law entered the room. Frankly speaking, in the light of recent events, John had forgotten about her. Selena was always away, which he was glad of. When her sister-in-law was home, however, she rarely visited Mickey, only when absolutely necessary. So when she came in, his father-in-law inquired, Is something the matter? You could say that. The young woman nodded. John, frankly, I don't like what's going on. What's going on? He asked, puzzled. At least this tutor's accommodation, Selena snorted. It's like a passable courtyard, honestly. You've got people running around, and you're taking care of them. Can you imagine? The old marismatic has decided to start treatment. The girl heard Selena's tragic voice. Well, he's not that old, and especially not a marismatic. But you're a clever girl, answered a man's voice, which, as far as Angelica knew, belonged to the manager John. When she had first seen him, he had seemed a slippery fellow. I hope you'll be able to talk him out of the treatment, the manager said after a brief pause. The tutor crept to the storeroom and, holding her breath, carefully pulled a smartphone out of her purse and pressed the recorder button. You know, we need the old man helpless, the manager continued, so you'll do your best. Besides, he's bound to find out that we've caused your husband's accident. Angelica covered her mouth with her hand in horror. Hush, Selena hissed, and she remembered how Julia had compared her to a snake with ears. I'm motivating you, Harry grinned. What a motivator, giggled John's sister-in-law, after which the tutor heard the sounds of kissing, intermittent breathing, and passionate whispering. Angelica had no desire to eavesdrop on their antics, and the girl hurried over to Mickey. What is it then? Thought the tutor. This Selena pretending to be a decent stepmother, representing her stepdaughter's interests, while she herself is robbing Mickey without remorse and spending his money with her lover. And that manager is good too. Angelica knew that her son John had been killed in a car accident, and apparently she was the one in question. It suddenly occurred to the girl what the lovers had set up the accident for, most likely for the purpose of further eliminating John Sr. as well. Oh mama, horrified the tutor, so it was they who set up the accident, and John and Juliet could be in danger too. At the thought of a student who had already suffered enough, Angelica felt completely creeped out. No, I just have to tell John everything. It's a good thing I made a tape, she thought. Angelica, is something wrong? John asked the tutor. Your face is gone. I have, she sighed, but not me, you. I don't understand. Angelica took out her phone and turned on the tape recorder. John listened to the conversation and, to the girl's amazement, laughed out loud. Well, that was to be expected, he said, wiping away tears. Selenka. Well, I never liked her, but we'll see who's who. Me too, thought Angelica. She remembered what Julia had said about the manager, and for the umpteenth time marveled at her childish intuition. After all, it is not for nothing they say that the mouth of a child speaks the truth. You are not afraid? Asked the girl. After all, you. She was embarrassed, and John asked with a smile, You mean an invalid? I'm not offended. Besides, the old man was meaningfully silent and got up from the bed. So you? From shock, Angelica could not utter another word. Yes, Angelica. John spread his hands. I'm not paralyzed. That is, I was, but the body, as predicted by the doctors, recovered on its own, without any surgery. I deliberately played this play to put the vigilance of my enemies to sleep. It's clear that my son was deliberately eliminated, but I didn't know who did it. There were several suspects. I eliminated one by one, leaving Selena and Harry. By the way, why don't you get them for me? Both of them. John's sister-in-law and the manager opened their mouths at the sight of John on his feet. Surprised? Now get out, both of you. I suppose you can guess why. I don't know what you mean, Celine said firmly. You don't? You don't? I don't advise you to deny it. There's a tape recording. A tape of what? Her sister-in-law exclaimed indignantly. Angelica, please turn on the tape, John asked the tutor, and seeing that Angelica hesitated, added, Don't be afraid, you won't be in any danger. They can't help but realize that if something happens to you, it'll be clear whose handiwork it is. Angelica turned on the tape, and Selena, hearing her own voice, gave the tutor a hateful look. Did you think I'd let you rob my own granddaughter and stain my son's memory? John asked icily, noticing the look on his daughter-in-law's face. Selena preferred to keep silent, and the former father-in-law looked at her squeamishly and said stiffly, Anyway, dear bride, you have 10 minutes to pack. You are allowed to stay in the house, and you shit right under my nose. I won't tolerate such ingratitude, I'm sorry. Well, you, dear Harry, are fired. I'm sure you'll never see a place like this again. Leave this house immediately and forget about it. I'll see you in court. Having got rid of his enemies, John breathed a sigh of relief and asked Angelica, Do not you find that with their departure it even breathes easier? The girl smiled. She was in complete agreement with her employer. As Selena was leaving the house, rolling out a crocodile-skin suitcase, the driver brought Julia home. Realizing what was going on, the overjoyed girl flew into the house, not even realizing that another pleasant surprise was waiting for her. Grandpa, did you kick Selena out? She exclaimed happily, and when she saw John sitting on his bed, she opened her mouth in surprise. I did, sweetie, he nodded. Grandfather, can you walk? Why didn't you say anything? It was necessary, John answered, and holding his granddaughter close to him, repeated, It was necessary. Cool, smiled Julia. And now you'll take me to the park again. I will. And in fact, now we'll live better than ever. By the way, Julia's vacation is soon, and we can go to the sea. How about it? The girl laughed with relief and answered, I'm all for it. Will Angelica come with us? Absolutely, and we'll take Evan and Archie with us. We're a family now. Yay, Julia screamed. The girl had already had time to get acquainted with Nikita and adored the boy. What is there? She sincerely considered him her little brother. It would seem that all the vicissitudes remained far behind. Selena and Harry received 10 years in prison each, and thus, good has triumphed over evil. But it seems a quiet old age is not about John. A few days later, he received a phone call from a woman he didn't know. Hello, John, she greeted the businessman and introduced herself. My name is Maria. I represent the interests of your ex-wife, Victoria. Hearing the ex-wife's name, John was taken aback. What does this one want? The answer to the unspoken question was not long in coming. The thing is that your Victoria is seriously ill, and she has not long to live, explained the attorney of the ex-wife of the businessman. She wants to see you. To be honest, John didn't really want to see his ex-wife, but the last will of a dying man is a holy thing. And then, apparently, it's really important. The ex-wives hadn't seen each other in over 20 years, and John was amazed at the change in Victoria. At the divorce proceedings, he had been confronted by a stately brunette with smooth, slightly swarthy skin, radiant brown eyes, and attractive lips. Now John could not believe that this gaunt older woman, who looked at him with completely colorless eyes, was his first wife. Well, hello, John, Victoria wheezed and coughed harshly. Hello, John replied discreetly. You wanted to see me. I've never seen you before, the ex-wife snorted, and John thought that their desires, or rather, their reluctance, coincided. He recognized her now, albeit vaguely. But I want to repent to you. Really? Yes, imagine that. I didn't expect it of myself, but they say it makes it easier to go to the afterlife. Have a seat. John sat down on the chair next to the bed of the dying ex-wife and prepared to listen. There wasn't much to tell. Victoria shrugged her thin shoulders. Well, John, the late Jacob wasn't your son. What do you mean? Mickey was stunned. After a string of failed attempts to conceive, the ex-wife sighed. A doctor I knew told me it was probably a matter of incompatibility and advised me to have a lover, so I took her advice. And eventually I did get pregnant with a lover. Oh God, John exclaimed, wrapping his arms around his head. He'd been so proud of Jacob for looking like him, the idiot. Victoria must have picked a lover with dark eyes and hair. Well, that's it, the dying wife said quietly, coughing again. Well, thank you for your frankness. John nodded and after a little thought asked, Is there anything I can do to help you? Medication or... I don't need anything, Victoria shook her head, because you've already kept me like a queen. There's enough for the funeral. Now go with God. You've repented, now you won't be afraid to die. Thank you for listening. John left his ex-wife's house depressed. You never know what to expect from a bitchy woman. Depends on the kind of woman though. Selena, for instance, had it written all over her face, or Angelica. The only difference is what it said. Victoria had always been unpredictable, even, as it turned out, on death's doorstep. John remembered Jacob. He loved the boy like a native son and was proud of his accomplishments, of which, thankfully, there were many. Besides, Jacob had made a significant contribution to this business. But anyway, John has only one native son, Evan, who only a few days ago found out about his kinship with the entrepreneur. So maybe it's time to start paying back his son's debts. After all, release from the detention center and the return of little Archie from the orphanage is the least that John could do for Evan. So John went to a seemingly long-forgotten address. Hi, Mallory, he said, smiling with just his eyes. Hi, John, she nodded. How are you doing? I'm fine. By the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to call you to thank you. Thank you? For what? John exclaimed in surprise. For getting Evan acquitted. Mallory, pleased, it's my duty as a father. Do you know what I came here for? Why did you come here? Let's start again, he said quietly, taking Mallory's hands. But we're so old, she smiled. Not at all, laughed John. We're 18. Or have you forgotten? Thanks for reminding me. 3 months passed. The small village church was covered with greenery, and it was an incredibly beautiful landscape. In front of the priest stood a gray-haired Nulu couple, but they knew they were 18. How beautiful Mallory is, isn't she? Angelica whispered to the groom. My mom is the most beautiful in the world. Evan immediately agreed. Not counting you. You're my favorite. 2 weeks ago they were married. Angelica stayed at John's house because thanks to her, John was able to expose the criminals and nail them to the wall. In addition, now Angelica became the daughter-in-law of an elderly businessman. So the question of housing for the newlyweds was solved. There was room for everyone in this spacious mansion. Julia looked at the newlyweds and was over the moon. They got rid of the hated Selena. Angelica and Evan adopted Julia. She had a brother, Archie, whom the girl loved with all her soul. This was quite enough for happiness, and now grandfather will marry a good woman. Despite her very young age, Julia realized that the family is the most valuable thing that a person has, and the fact that she was growing up was great. After the wedding, all went to a cozy rural restaurant, the owner of which was a good friend of John. The guests were welcomed by a hall full of fresh flowers and, of course, a beautifully set table. An elderly newlywed took the floor. First of all, my dears, I suggest you thank fate for bringing us all together. Sometimes I think that all this might not have happened, and I feel sad, especially because Olenka and I would never have become husband and wife. Well, enough already, old geezer, laughed Mallory. We are together, and everything else is such nonsense. That's right, said John approvingly, and now I propose to drink to our happiness. Bitterly, Evan exclaimed, and the rest of the group joined in. Now I'd like to ask for a moment of attention, exclaimed a friend of the groom, whose name was Mickey. The guests were silent, and Mickey came on stage and took out his violin from backstage and approached his old friend. Dear friend, I remember you not only as a successful businessman and just a good man. I also remember you as a talented violinist. I suggest you remember your youth. Play us something. I remembered my grandmother as a girl. John laughed. No, guys, do you want my disgrace? Why would you want to be embarrassed? I'm sure you'll be fine. John, Angelica winked slyly, and remember how you told me that the hands will remember everything? Well, it looks like I can't get away with this, John said. God help you, you're on. John took the violin in his hands as if it were a piece of fine crystal. The audience watched the elderly businessman, who never became a musician, and waited in awe for him to start playing. And he did. It was the same tune composed by Mallory, his first, and as it turned out, only love. John began to play timidly, as if reluctant, and then the old man sank into a veil of memories, and the melody sounded more and more confidently. Now his thoughts were in the place where he was young, in love and full of plans. Bravo! Shouted Mickey when John had finished playing. The blushing violinist bowed to the audience and began to play a cheerful medley. The audience clapped in time with the music. And then there were cries of bitter, toast to love and anticipation of happiness, which only a man can dream of. Time flew inexorably. Evan and Angelica had a son, whom the couple named Billy. And 2 years after the birth of their son, Angelica proudly announced to her husband that the family was about to have a new addition. And not just an addition, but a whole twin. As it turned out, 2 girls. Just some kind of female battalion. Shook his head happy father. Well, giggled Angelica, beautiful ladies will be more only one. So, maybe after the birth of twin girls we'll try to equalize the number of ladies and gentlemen. Evan winked. God forbid. His wife splashed her hands. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have our daughters first. When John found out that he was going to become a grandfather again, he thought about buying a new house, a bigger one. As a result, this friendly family settled outside the city in a monumental mansion, stylized as a Boyer manor. Some of their friends and acquaintances said that the young people should live separately. However, Evan, Angelica, and their children liked to live together with their parents. After all, they were the most wonderful old people in the world. And then both families lived their own lives. John and Mallory traveled a lot, and if they were at home, they did not bother the young with advice and moralizing. Well, and the young people in turn tried not to upset the old people and do not bother them in vain. 3 years after the birth of twins Catherine and Elizabeth, Mallory seriously ill. The cancer was detected when there was nothing to be done, except to accept it. The old woman quietly passed away in her sleep, right on the night of Epiphany. She is well now, Angelica said quietly, looking at the calm, peaceful face of her old friend, and crossed herself. On the day of the funeral of the elderly musician, despite the frosts of baptism, it was warm and quiet. Flakes of snow were falling. John, aged from grief, did not shed a tear. "No more tears," said the widower, watching his ex-wife being lowered into the ground. The elderly businessman threw a handful of earth and whispered, "Sleep well, my love. Our happiness was short, but real." A month later, John himself was gone. "Grandpa couldn't do it without her," sobbed Julia, who was in her senior year of high school. She had so dreamed of inviting her grandfather to her graduation, but alas. A few days after John's 40th birthday, the children decided to sell the mansion. The maintenance of such a huge house was not cheap, and Evan and Angelica had to raise 5 children. In addition, this year Julia entered the institute, and it implied expenses, and Archie's enrollment was just around the corner. The buyer came along a couple months later. He was a wealthy older man, formerly a successful producer, now the owner of 2 restaurants. "I want to give the house to my doll." He winked at the Mallory couple. Evan and Angelica nodded absently. In truth, they didn't care who they sold to, as long as they sold. The children were at school, and the couple packed their bags, wondering how the joyous events of the house had been intertwined with the sad ones. And here's how it happens, Angelica thought. If I hadn't met Vanya and fallen in love, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have come to work for John. We wouldn't have adopted Julia. Vanya might never have known who his father was. There's all sorts of don'ts, but history, as you know, does not bear the subjunctive mood. Philosophical thoughts interrupted the voice of her husband. "Angelica, what is it? Look what I found." He even stood by the closet, which he was preparing to dismantle, and pointed to a door in the wall. A secret door. Angelica spluttered. "Exactly. It's crazy." The husband shook his head in surprise. "How long have lived here and did not even know about the existence of this door?" "Yes, I wonder what's in there. Let's go in and see for ourselves." Evan and Angelica entered the secret door. The room behind the secret door was dark, so they didn't immediately see what made them numb with terror. Goosebumps ran down each of the couple's backs. There were 3 human skulls on the shelf, and the room looked terribly dark. "Do you think they are real?" Angelique asked, trembling with fear, pointing at the skulls. "I have no idea," Evan said. "Hold on. I'm going to get a flashlight." "I'll go with you," said the wife hastily. "You coward. You'll chicken out." Angelica shivered. Julia, who had come back from school, entered the room. "What is this?" The girl exclaimed in surprise when she saw the secret door open. "And this, daughter, is a secret door," Evan answered. "Wow. What's behind the secret door?" Julia asked, looking through it, and immediately recoiled. "Oh, it's so dark." "Well, what's a flashlight for?" grinned her father. They entered the mysterious room, and when Evan shined the flashlight, all 3 of them gasped. Right in the middle of the room was a large chest. "I wonder what's in it," muttered the head of the family. "Probably gold and diamonds," Julia giggled. "Yeah, keep your pocket wide open," said Angelica. The chest, which was covered with cobwebs, was not locked, and when they jointly lifted the lid, they could not restrain a cry of amazement. "And you said—" "Keep your pockets wide open," said Julia, turning to her mother. There were indeed jewels in the chest. A lot of jewelry, including gold and diamonds, and there was a letter. "Oh, it's grandfather's handwriting." Angelica took the letter and began to read it aloud. "My dear children, if you are reading this letter, you must have discovered a secret door. Now let me guess," John wrote, "you must be getting ready to sell the house because it costs a lot of money to maintain. Relax. These jewels I've collected over the years will save you from having to sell the house. It's up to the owner, of course, but I'd be very hurt if you did sell the house. It's sacred to me. I'd like to see more of John's generation grow up here. But of course, the choice is yours. I'm sure you'll make the right decision. I love you all very much. Your John." P.S. By the way, the skulls on the shelves are just a prop for mystery. "So, what do you think?" Angelica asked after finishing the letter. "Yes, grandfather loved special effects," Julia sighed. "His helpless state is worth it. Do you remember?" "How could I not remember? grinned her mother. I saw Mickey get out of bed and thought I was hallucinating. And now he surprised us even after his death. So what are we going to do with the house? Evan spoke up. The answer is obvious. Angelica smiled. I'd be ashamed to sell it anyway. And it's not even about the jewelry. Perhaps, agreed her husband. The doorbell rang. The restaurateur's producer and a young, glamorous woman who seemed vaguely familiar to Angelique appeared in the video eye. When the couple entered, she was surprised to recognize Selena, Mickey's former sister-in-law. So this is your house? Selena was surprised. She had changed over the years, but she was still pretty. Selena had cut her hair short and changed it from golden blonde to dark brown. She had also lost some weight, and if it weren't for the haughty expression on her face, Selena could be called a real beauty. In fact, she was, except that they were used to appreciating the beauty of the soul above all else. Judging by the unkind expression on Julia's face, the girl recognized her former stepmother as well. I'm sorry, Angelica said, embarrassed, but the house is not for sale. What kindergarten? Exclaimed the man, then sold, then not sold. I was on my way from the city, by the way. Yes, I understand, she nodded, and we are ready to compensate you for the cost of travel. What does money have to do with it? The buyer grumbled with annoyance. I really like the house, the aura is good, and look, maybe you're not satisfied with the price. I'm willing to pay more. I assure you it's not about the price, Angelique assured me. Is it about me? Selena gritted her teeth. No, it's nothing personal, the former tutor shrugged. It's just that something came up, and we changed our minds about selling the house. I don't understand. Did you two know each other? The man was confused. We do. Angelica nodded, but it has nothing to do with selling the house. As I said, it's nothing personal. The buyer, realizing there would be no deal, sighed disappointedly and said, well, too bad. Come on, Selena. We'll look for something else for you. Selena just shrugged her shoulders and the buyers left the mansion. As soon as the door closed behind them, all three of them laughed. I still can't forget Selena's face. Julia laughed. It was a sight to behold, Angelica agreed. And Selena doesn't lose her way, she said ironically. She's got herself a new rich guy. I even feel sorry for him. She's going to make him have an accident. Tears welled up in Julia's eyes. Of course, Evan loved her as his daughter, but no one could replace her father. When the girl remembered Selena, hatred embraced her with terrible force. Selena John was furious. It was such a great house, and this tutor confused all the cards. Besides, Selena had old scores to settle with Angelica. A fortune like that slipped through the cracks. And the years in prison, and all because of that hussy. And she and he had a good thing going. Who'd have thought that damn tutor was standing there, listening to their conversation and recording it on a tape recorder? Is she trying to get a rise out of you? Well, he who laughs. I wonder what made them change their mind about selling the house. Harvey, the restaurateur, said thoughtfully. Well, I don't know, shrugged Selena. I wonder, she thought, what did she and her hubby use to buy such a huge house? Or did old John dole it out? He'll do it. Selena already knew that her former father-in-law was in the kingdom of heaven, but she didn't know that the tutor's husband was John's own son. I don't think it's that simple. Harvey shook his head. It just can't be. When a man decides to sell his house, he needs money, or he's serious about moving. And then they change their mind overnight. No warning. Something's not right. We should do some research on this house. The young woman decided Harvey was probably right. Who knows? It might help Selena get even with Angelica. The restaurateur went home, and his beloved took out of the bar a bottle of his favorite cream liqueur, made himself comfortable on the couch, and plunged into the memories. Already in the 10th grade, Selena Kolevanova knew that appearance was her main trump card. She knew another thing. This trump card could help Selena to change her life for the better. After all, it was then that she, a girl from a poor family, fell in love with the son of a successful businessman, Jacob John. The guy offered her to date, and Selena immediately agreed. She imagined that she would live in a luxurious mansion and, of course, would not work. However, at the end of school, a rich dad sent Jacob to study abroad, and all dreams of a beautiful life collapsed overnight. Relax, Selena said to herself mentally. I'm a beautiful girl, And Jacob is not the end of the story. She had a new plan, which, by the way, seemed much more interesting. Of course, it would take more than a year to realize the plan, but for sure. Selena's plan was as follows. To begin with, the girl decided to enroll in technical school and learn the profession of accountant. Actually, with her ability to do math, she could go to university. But the higher institution was not suitable for Selena for one simple reason, because it was necessary to study there for 5 years, while the term of study in her chosen technical school was only 2 years. Waiting for a beautiful life for 5 years? No way, no way. After technical school, she will work a little in some firm, find a wealthy beau, and marry him legally. And then Selena will live a life of pure pleasure. My plan will work, thought the girl with delight. When she learned that she was enrolled in technical school, what else will happen? Selena studied well and was confidently going for a red diploma. "You'll make a great accountant," said Emma, the accounting teacher, approvingly. Hopefully not for long, Selena thought. Work? What a bore. Well, she did not understand women who defended the right to work as a doctor, teacher, chemist, streetcar driver, and God knows who else. And when her friends told Selena that they wanted to work for pleasure, she wrinkled her nose as if she had a toothache. Where's the work and where's the fun? Selena snorted when Aubrey's classmate told her plans for her life. "I don't know," she shrugged. "Personally, I think I'm going to make work a pleasure. Socializing again." "Do you see yourself as a hybrid of an incubator, a governess, and a doll from an intimate store?" "No," smiled the girl. "I see myself as the beauty and pride of the house. The main thing is to move in the right direction." She only shook her head. Meanwhile, Selena's plan worked even after receiving her red diploma. She managed to get a job at a rather prosperous confectionery company. Selena was repeatedly offered to enter the correspondence department of the institute, and having studied, to take the position of technologist. But the young accountant categorically refused. After all, she had other plans for life. Finally, Selena smiled luck in the form of a new commercial director. Tony was single, and the young woman decided, "Here's my chance," and Selena didn't miss it. In the firm worked a lot of spectacular women, but the commercial director chose her, and not just chose, and called her to marry. The whole organization was celebrating the wedding. After the honeymoon in Paris came the harsh everyday life, and they turned out to be not as rosy as Selena had first thought. "I've decided to quit," the young woman announced to her husband. "What is it?" Tony asked with a smile. "Or do you want to make me happy?" Selena understood perfectly well what her spouse meant. However, she preferred to pretend she didn't. "To make you happy," she smiled back. "I'm going to take care of the house and spoil you with home-cooked food. I assure you, I'll make it as good as in the restaurant." Tony stretched out disappointedly. "Selena, I appreciate your eagerness to do housework, but I don't mind a woman working. Did you think I was planning on locking you away? I assure you, that is not the case." "All right," Selena nodded, hiding her disappointment. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Tony replied, kissing her. "I realize that most modern women don't want to be housewives." And Selena continued working at the company. "Well, and what are you steamed?" With a chuckle asked a friend, Veronica. When Selena told about the conversation with her husband does not embarrass your freedom. "Is that a bad thing? Didn't you say that the husband should support the family and the woman should take care of the house and herself?" "Well, I did, but my outlook on life has changed. Now, Selena, I'm all for equality. A golden cage isn't good either." Veronica was married to a businessman who was against her working and accordingly knew what she was talking about. However, her friend's words made no impression on Selena. All she knew was that she did not wish to work. Selena wanted to live a life of pleasure and shine at social events. And the golden cage? Well, there are other women living in it, and Veronica's just going crazy. As time went on, Selena realized that Tony just didn't respect women who didn't work. In fact, there was nothing to understand. Once he contemptuously called one of these women domestic, and Selena realized that in this marriage she had nothing more to catch. When the young woman talked about divorce, Tony was surprised, however, did not resist. Selena again launched into an active search for a wealthy Sujanogo. She studied dating sites from time to time, Friends introduced Selena to different men, but eventually she did it on her own. A chance meeting with a former lover in the restaurant of a business hotel became fateful. She decided that Jacob John is what she needs. The young, handsome widower was rich. The only thing that confused Selena was that Jacob had a daughter. But on the other hand, what could she do? No one forced her to love Juliet as if she were her own. It was enough to give the appearance of caring. Meeting Sosnowski, her father-in-law John's manager, turned Selena's life upside down. She realized that she had fallen in love, and it seems not without reciprocity. And so it proved to be. Harry turned out to be not only savvy, but also a greedy, calculating man. But most importantly, he was willing to do anything for Selena. That was what had prompted the manager's plan to eliminate first his son, then his father, and then the little Harris. Jacob's plan was a success, but his father's was a misfire. The doctors said John's body would recover in time, but Selena didn't believe it. As it turned out, she shouldn't have. I wonder when it happened. Selena thought sometimes when she was in places not so remote, because at first he didn't fake it. Does it matter? If it hadn't been for that damn tutor, Andre and I might have been able to finish what we started. The young woman was released on parole. Despite the fact that Selena returned not from the resort, she still looked beautiful, except she'd lost weight, which means that nothing prevents her from finding a new rich patron. Selena couldn't get a real job anyway, and she didn't want one, so it's back to the search. The first thing, she decided to change her appearance. Selena cut off her long blonde hair and dyed it a darker color. Looking in the mirror, she was pleasantly surprised. The new hairstyle and hair color transformed Selena. She looked younger and her face looked more interesting. Now it was just a matter of looking for an object to build a bright future. Her requirements for a candidate for a life partner were simple: man must be single and rich. The first thing the young woman bought after leaving the colony was an inexpensive smartphone. After returning from the hairdresser's shop, Selena began to concentrate on studying dating sites and was disappointed. It felt like the most flawed men were sitting on them. What's so surprising, though, she thought. A decent man doesn't need dating sites. With nothing to do, Selena logged onto a social networking site and a post caught her eye. A new restaurant owned by Harvey's former producer needed a bartender. No, Selena wasn't interested in the job, but the owner. When she was married to Jacob, they had gone to the concert of a well-known musical group whose producer was Harvey. This band was not Harvey's only child, and no wonder. His entrepreneurial spirit was legendary in the city, so now he owns a restaurant. After typing Harvey into the search engine, Selena almost jumped for joy. The restaurant owner was divorced, so what is not a chance to improve the financial situation and at the same time, arrange a personal life? Unfortunately, there was no money to spend in this definitely not cheap restaurant. However, there was an idea. Selena put on a small black dress, left from her past life, black lacquered shoes made of bright, spectacular makeup, and taking a clutch in the tone of shoes, gracefully left the house. She could not afford a cab, and the young woman went, as she hoped, to meet the life from which she did not want to get rid of. "What shall we order?" the waiter asked. "A salad with mussels and avocado, a glass of grappa, and perhaps a fruit platter," Selena replied with a dazzling smile. "Well, fine choice," nodded the guy and stepped away from the table. "That's for sure," the young woman grinned to herself, not referring to dinner at all. It was just under an hour before the restaurant closed, and Selena couldn't help but notice the slanted glances of the bartender and waiter in her direction. A couple minutes later, the latter came to her table and asked, "Will you order something else?" "You see, there's a situation." Selena hesitated. "What's the matter?" The waiter was wary, guessing what it was. "The thing is that I forgot the money," she answered, embarrassed. "I would like to solve this issue directly with Harvey. But maybe you could call someone and borrow some money. You see, it's getting late." "Well, who am I going to call now?" "Well, Harvey and I know each other a little. I think that would be easier," Selena said more firmly. "Well, all right," the waiter replied with a little hesitation. Harvey arrived about 20 minutes later. "I'm listening to you," he said in an impassive voice, not without interest, I must say, looking at Selena. You see, I forgot my money. She smiled shyly, and in order to avoid conflict, I decided to address you directly. Aha, nodded the owner of the place. Well, commendable, but you know what? Selena looked questioningly at Harvey, and he said exactly what she expected. This dinner will be on the house. How? The young woman pretended to be surprised, and for what merits? And consider it a component, said Harvey, and winking added, personally for me. That day Harvey drove her home. They exchanged phone numbers and started dating. Harvey turned out to be a generous and gallant chancellor. Too bad he didn't ask her to marry him. But he once complained about Selena's living conditions and promised to buy her an apartment. Or should it be a house? Harvey asked with a smile. A house is great. Selena nodded approvingly, remembering John's mansion. Well, that's a deal. The house the beau had chosen was much cooler than John's mansion. Selena, seeing his photo, was even confused. What am I going to do alone in such a huge house? I think you and I will find something to do, Harvey said meaningfully, and the next day they went to make a deal. When Selena saw the lady of the house, she was surprised. However, she was much more surprised that the sellers refused the deal. At first, Selena thought it was because of her, but Harvey convinced her otherwise, and then she thought it was strange too. After a couple of shots of delicious liquor, the young woman felt sleepy. Selena gladly laid down on the cool silk sheets and instantly fell asleep. The next morning, she received a call from Harvey. "Kitten, what have I found out?" he exclaimed. "Yes," trying to make her voice sound indifferent, Selena said, "And what did you find out?" "According to rumors, there might be a treasure hidden in this house." "What nonsense?" snorted the young woman. "Maybe it's nonsense. Maybe it's not. The thing is, there were legends about this house. Rumors, perhaps. Either way, it should all be checked out." Celine sighed. Truth be told, it didn't sound very plausible. But what the hell was the point? There's no smoke without fire. "Evan, I have a feeling someone's been in the house," Angelica told her husband. "Why would that be?" Evan asked. "When I left for work yesterday, I closed the window. When I came home this evening, the window was open. But maybe you hadn't closed the window after all," he suggested. "Evan, do I look like an old sclerotic?" "Well, why would you look like an old sclerotic? Maybe you meant to close the window. But in your haste, you forgot and you thought you closed it." "Maybe so," Angelica said, but there was no hint of confidence in her voice. She remembered perfectly well that she had closed the window. 3 days after this conversation, Evan was forced to take his wife's words more seriously. He noticed that the very closet behind which the secret door had been moved. But Evan remembered that he had pushed the closet in quite tightly. Something was telling him. Was this related to their attempt to sell the house? Why? There was only one theory that came to mind, and Evan didn't like it. Before she went to bed, Angelica said to her husband, "Evan, can't we get rid of these jewels? Well, we lived without them. Now you're a successful businessman. Things are going well, and maybe you think you were looking for jewelry too." He sighed. There was no point in playing the silent game when it was obvious. "And how do you propose I get rid of them?" Evan asked, puzzled. "And then don't forget that we didn't sell the house because of them. Business is business, but you can't get by without a financial cushion these days." "I understand," sighed the young woman, "but I can feel it in my bones that these jewels will bring us a lot of problems. So turn them into money. What's the problem? In fact, my father left them to us as an inheritance, didn't he?" "So," Angelica sighed again, "but somehow it's all. I don't even know how to explain it. I'll put it this way. I have a bad feeling about this. Why don't we donate it to some orphanage or hospice?" "Angelica, I'll let you in on a secret. I do too. But then we have to do something about it. Without them, we can't afford to keep the house. You know that." "I think I know what to do," Angelica said slowly. Well, it's really not a big deal. Harvey, I have found out everything," excitedly exclaimed Harvey, the man who from time to time rendered Harvey specific services. "There is a secret door in this house." "Well, and the treasure that has been talked about, does it really exist?" "The room behind the secret door was empty," the handyman said. "Apparently the treasure had been hidden away, if it was there at all. So why the hell are you saying you found out? And come back as soon as you know something concrete." "Understood," Harvey nodded nonchalantly. Come on, Harvey grimaced and waved his hand. It's obvious what's been stashed away, he thought. Harvey could feel in his bones that there was a treasure, but was it in the house now? Everyone in John's house was sleeping peacefully. Only Julia was awake. The clock was already past midnight, but the girl did not sleep a wink. It had been 3 months since Julia had fallen in love with a boy who came to the parallel class from another school. The guy was really incredibly good-looking, tarry hair, piercing blue eyes, and Apollo's physique. Unusual looks, Julia thought, looking at his photo on the social network. It's just a pity that the boy didn't pay any attention to her. And why would he need Julia when this diamond was chasing almost the whole female half of the school? She, of course, God had not hurt her looks either, but one girl more, one less for such a handsome boy obviously did not matter. Under such unhappy thoughts, Julia, hoping to fall asleep, slowly drank a glass of milk, and suddenly she was horrified to see how 2 men in dark clothes and masks approached the cellar, where they kept pickles, jams, and homemade wine. In the hands of one of the intruders was a plug, with which he skillfully broke the lock, after which the men climbed inside. With horror, the girl could not move from her seat. It suddenly seemed to Julia that if she did so, the criminals would hear, and then, shrieking with terror, the girl ran toward her parents' bedroom, where she ran into Billy. You heard the rustling from the cellar too? Whispered his brother. And even saw everything, Julia whispered back in a tragic voice. I was sitting in the kitchen, and there were 2 men there, and they, from excitement and fear the girl began to stammer, but still finished. There were 2 men in the cellar. So what are we waiting for? We have to wake up the parents and call the police, the boy said firmly, and banged on the door of Evan and Angelica's bedroom. The first to wake up was the mother. She had been a restless sleeper lately. What's wrong? Angelica asked in a sleepy voice. There's someone in the cellar, the son whispered excitedly. Julia called the police. Already? Laughed Evan, who also woke up and stretched his eyes. But Mr. Harvey can't wait to get his father's jewels. So they're in the cellar now? Billy exclaimed. The wail of a police siren prevented the parents from answering. All 4 of them went downstairs. Did you call the police? One of the officers asked. Yes, nodded Evan. What happened? There are 2 criminals in our cellar right now, replied the homeowner. Where's the cellar? Over there, Evan pointed, and the law enforcement officers rushed in that direction. Hey, is there anyone here? One of the policemen shouted, and the other shone a flashlight into the cellar. There were 2 men lurking in the corner. Come out at once, shouted the policeman, and the intruders had no choice but to obey. Archie, Catherine, and Elizabeth came down into the hallway. Why can't you sleep? Angelica asked, more for the sake of order. You can't sleep, Archie muttered. What's the matter? I think it's obvious, Evan grinned. People came for the jewelry. So they're in the cellar? Patience, boys, replied the father in a mysterious tone, and at that moment one of the policemen entered the house and invited the couple to come with them. So, who sent you? Asked the investigator Anthony, but the criminals were silent as fish. Who is the customer? I asked. The thieves continued to remain silent. Do you have any idea who it could be? The investigator turned to the couple. Actually, I do, Evan nodded. It's probably Harvey, the owner of the restaurants. Are you sure? Yes, we recently planned to sell the mansion, and he was the only potential buyer. Of course, theoretically, it could be anyone, but I don't believe in such coincidences. So Anthony asked, turning to the night spies again, is it really Harvey? You realize it's going to come out. I told you not to sign up for this, muttered one of the criminals, and Angelica only then noticed that the boys were still young, not much older than Julia. I wonder what made them do it, she thought. So it was really Harvey? The investigator repeated his question. Yes, admitted the second intruder. The couple arrived home in the morning. The kids were awake. They were hungry for details. There's nothing to tell, shrugged the head of the family. Those bastards were sent by Mr. Harvey, but they will be used as witnesses in the case. Why? Julia asked. They're just young kids, Evan said. What did they have to do with anything? They weren't even Harvey's people. They were just kids. Kids from dysfunctional families who wanted to make what they thought was easy money. How would they know there was fake jewelry in the cellar? Fake? The children exclaimed in unison. Exactly, smiled Angelica. When it became clear to the Mallorys that someone was looking for the secret door and obviously the jewelry, they decided to take emergency measures. Angelica took cheap costume jewelry imitating diamonds, pearls, and other precious stones, and the couple substituted the originals for glass. Well, and the real jewelry is in a safe deposit box at the train station. She finished her story with a smile. It was all our mom's idea, Evan said, putting his arm around his wife. Her idea. Mom is our head. Elizabeth yawned. Well, ahead, said Angelica modestly. Let's go to bed. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. Thank God, tomorrow is Sunday. Harvey, asked the policeman, a representative man in a luxurious satin robe, who had just brewed a good portion of coffee. Yes, that's me, nodded the restaurateur. What can I do for you? You are under arrest on a charge of organizing a crime, replied the policeman nonchalantly. What nonsense, exclaimed Harvey. I am a respected man in the city, a businessman, not some thief in the law. One doesn't prevent the other, said the second policeman nonchalantly, and added, Harvey, you'll have to come with us. You have 10 minutes to pack. I want a lawyer. One phone call was not canceled, the police officer noted. After hearing about the arrest of a high-profile suitor, Selena was ready to throw down. It's that damn tutor again. How long would that thing stay in her way? Selena knew it was pointless to retaliate. She would only hurt herself. The young woman was not involved in this case, so it was better not to wait the storm while it was still quiet. It's better to look for a new wealthy man. She's not getting any younger. You should go to work, said Veronica. Well, you're a smart woman. Aren't you tired of waiting for the weather? Who needs me with a criminal record? Selena sighed. I'm certainly not going to get a job in my specialty. They were sitting in a summer cafe on the seafront, and Selena noticed that her friend was looking around, probably afraid that some of her husband's men will catch her with an ex-con. She thought with a wry chuckle, and she wasn't far from the truth. It's unlikely that you'll get a job in your specialty, Veronica nodded, but you could get a job in a bar or a kitchen worker. Selena interrupted irritably. Thank you for your good advice, or I wouldn't have guessed without you. Well, suit yourself. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Her friend resolutely got up from the table and walked away. Selena knew they would never see each other again. What if I go abroad? A thought struck her, by the way. I have some money, enough for the first time. And here, it seems, I have nothing to catch. Did you not know that this house has long been rumored to have a treasure in it? Incredulously asked the investigator during the pre-trial conversation. Even I had heard about it. No, Evan replied. All we know is that my father bought jewelry and, as it turned out, put it in a chest. Not all of the jewelry was purchased by your father, Anthony said. A few pieces were lying there much earlier. The house had originally belonged to a rich merchant, then to some other people, and when they died, it had been empty for several years. Tell me, please, do we have to pay something for finding these ornaments? Angelica inquired. A tax for some percentage. By law, you have to pay for something that didn't belong to you, Anthony explained. But as I explained, it's only a few pieces, and a special investigation will reveal which ones, so you won't lose too much. That's not the point, Mallory said with a sigh. We just wanted to keep things fair. You know, we're even planning to donate some of the money from the jewelry sale to the orphanage. Well, it's the right thing to do, said the investigator approvingly. You'll do a really good deed. And I, for my part, will try to make sure that you pay the minimum. The producer-restaurateur got 5 years in prison. They were glad that justice had been served, but that's all. There was no gloating at all, except that there was anger at the thought of a grown-up, respectable man using young, stupid boys to do his evil deeds. It's because of such Harvey and his kind that young people stumble, Evan sadly stated. He remembered how many years ago he had been framed and wondered how many unjustly convicted people there were. As the couple walked out of the courthouse, Evan suddenly asked, Angelica, do you remember your father and mother's wedding? Of course I remember, she replied with a smile. But why do you ask? Because I want to suggest that you do the same. Let's get married. This is a very serious step, Angelica said slowly, looking at her husband intently. Evan exclaimed, I think we have proved to each other and to everyone who knows us that we are not serious. So what about the wedding? Are you in?" "Yes," whispered the woman, and tears of happiness glistened in her beautiful and so dear eyes. The small, recently renovated village church was still covered with greenery. But the landscape became even more luxurious, because now, after many years, it was ennobled by landscape design. In front of the bishop stood a couple of mature age, but in their hearts each of them was no more than 18. True love knows no age. Behind the married servants of God, Evan and Angelica, stood their 5 children and their family friend Harvey Mickey. In spite of his advanced age, he still ran the village restaurant, and he did it well. "Well, now," Harvey Petrovich said at the end of the wedding, and everyone accepted his invitation with pleasure. And again the hall, fragrant with fresh flowers, shouts of Gorko, and wishes of love and happiness. And then Angelica played on the violin the very melody, with which, in fact, and began the history of this large and united family. Somewhere out there on the earth, Selena was wandering in search of another rich man, and restaurateur Harvey was serving his sentence. And here, in a cozy hall, people enjoyed the atmosphere of happiness and peace. And John and Mallory looked down on them from heaven and were genuinely happy. Now the late entrepreneur John could be at peace. The mansion with the secret would never be sold, and its walls would be voiced by more than one more child's voice.